a Friday night. And we got a great show for you, as always. This week it's going to be a little bit special, though. This week, we're going to be reviewing episodes 3, 4, and 5, or chapter 11, 12, and 13 of The Mandalorian. And it's all coming at you right now.
You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're back. You're back in the studio. This is so exciting. It's actually good to have you back here, man.
Glad to be back, man.
Yeah, this is good. Got your little Funko Pops behind you now, and
yes,
got
my green screen behind me. I'm ready.
Yes, right. I was gonna say, yeah, we could key some stuff out.
Yep, definitely.
So we've actually been having some fun the last few weeks. We've done a couple of special shows.
Yeah, man, we had fun with the holiday special.
The holiday special was great. The holiday special was actually awesome. Me, Daryl, and another friend of ours who actually co-hosted the show last week, Dave Cossey, we all watched the holiday special. So we'll definitely leave a link in the comments so you guys can check that out, because that was hilarious.
Yeah, our buddy Jason was here with us, and
yes,
Ronaldo.
He is. Oh,
What's
nice.
going on, gentlemen?
Well, good. It's always good to have, our friends back with us.
Definitely.
It's nice to have Jason from the beginning, too.
Yeah.
All right, so this week we are actually going to review, because we've gotten a little bit behind.
Yeah.
Got a little bit behind on our episodes. I don't know what happened. I know you had to go out of town.
Yeah.
You had a lot of family things that happened, and then, there was work schedule stuff, and, everything was crazy, and we got a couple of special shows out. But the problem is that we were never able to actually review The Mandalorian.
Right.
So now, ready to get into it?
Hey, man, let's play some catch up.
Let's do it. All right, so Season 2, Episode 3 of The Mandalorian.
Or chapter 11.
Or Chapter 11.
However you're choosing to look at it.
Yeah. I kind of feel the need to say it both ways because,
Right.
some people are really sensitive about that stuff.
Yeah, they're like, no, it's chapter
Yeah,
11.
it's technically, guys, Chapter 11. So
Right.
for all of you, picky purists out there, we'll go with that. But it was called The Heiress, right?
Yep.
All right. Well, why don't you tell us, remind us what it was about,
Okay.
and then we can get into it. We can break this thing down.
All right, this particular episode was directed by Bryce Dallas Howard. And we find ourselves in the Razor Crest, heading to a planet called Trask with the child, the frog lady, who that's everybody just names her the frog lady.
I know.
And,
I know.
And
It's
the
just like the
Mandalorian.
Baby Yoda thing,
Right.
Frog lady. I know she had, either they said her species or she had a name or something.
Yeah.
But
anywho, they're on their way to this planet called Trask because she has her eggs and she's trying to get to her husband, and these eggs are the last of her particular, I guess, cycle or whatever, however they kind of call that. So, of course, Baby Yoda's been like picking those things off like left and right since the last episode. And so then now here we are, we're at Trask, and now she's kind of reunited with her husband. They see each other on the dock, and they're like having like this great time. Like, okay, we finally see each other. And so then now we have Baby Yoda still hungry. So
as always.
So, Mando kind of notices him eyeing the eggs again. He's like, don't worry about it. I'm going to get you something to eat. And so they kind of go into this whole, he's still searching for other Mandalorians. And so he's asking for information. So after that, they kind of go into this bar, and he gets to feed Baby Yoda, and Baby Yoda's kind of eating some what looks to be like octopus or some form of squid or something.
Yeah, that
like
kind of, it almost reminded me of a face hugger from Alien.
Yeah, especially when that thing,
especially the way that it latched onto him.
Oh man, that was hilarious.
It was funny, but there was a
Kinda-
first part of me that was kind of like, is this
creepy?
Yeah, is this like a thing? Is he gonna have to like bust out the flamethrower or what?
It's gonna be roasted octopi in a minute.
That's right.
So, in this particular episode, you see a lot of the Mon Calamari. So you see a lot of that particular species on this particular world. It's pretty much indigenous to most of the aquatic or amphibian-like, characters or I guess aliens, if you will.
Well, I should point out, too, and this is true for each one of the episodes we're covering. As you notice, we're basically going in a chronological type of order. So we're talking about episode 3, and we're only talking about episode 3.
Right.
When we talk about episode 4,
no further spoilers.
right, we're talking about episode 4. Now, we might reference episode 3, but you get the idea. The other thing I should point out, this is a total spoiler discussion. So when we get to episode 5, which was the one that came out today, if you didn't see it, then you might want to turn this off.
Right.
Because we're going to be spoiling this one to death.
So eventually, Mando gets the information that he needs to get on this ship, and while they're on this ship, of course, everybody I guess there's been kind of a APB put out pretty much on Mandalorian and the child, and I guess the word got to some of the people on this particular planet, and so now they actually are on the ship, and one of the Mon Calamari, pretty much, or a Corrin, I think that's what he is.
Yeah, he's a Corrin.
He's a Corrin, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Akbar is a Mon Calamari.
Yeah, Akbar's a Mon Calamari, but this guy's a Corrin, right? And
they kind of reminded me, by the way, especially when they're on the actual ship. Mm-hmm. They totally reminded me of the Pirates of Caribbean.
Yeah, that's what. Definitely. So yeah, so one of the Corrin, dock workers or whatever, was lured Mando and the child over to this whole little trap door, and with this whole, so I think it's called a Mamacore, pretty much had like swallowed up the child because they kind of knocked the thing over into it, and they pretty much wanted to capture the Mandalorian in this whole thing, and so of course Mando freaking out jumps in after it, and they kind of end up trapping him, but then out of nowhere, who shows up? But some of the Mandalorians that he's looking for, led by the one and only Bo-Katan. So now we finally get to see Bo-Katan. She's finally here and rescues the Mandalorian, Din Djarin. And now they're kind of whisked away, and then they kind of start explaining some things. And then, of course, Mando kind of realizes that, okay, wait, you guys are taking off your helmets and stuff. You guys aren't real Mandalorian. She's like, oh, you're one of those people. so they kind of had to kind of explain the difference, to him about like, okay, true Mandalorians versus the group that Mando was actually a part of.
Children of the Watch, I think they were called.
Right. So we get that up, we get that kind of squared away. And then, of course, Bo-Katan wants the Mandalorian to help them on their little mission that they have of stopping the Empire, or the remnants of the Empire, pretty much trying to get some of these weapons off this planet. So they enlist the Mandalorian. They stow aboard this whole ship. And in the process of that, they're securing all these different weapons and whatnot. And then, of course, he's doing all this for information on the Jedi. He's trying to figure out, like, okay, where can I find, the Jedi, because I'm supposed to return this child back to the Jedi, but I have no idea where they are. So of course Bo-Katan's like, look, help us out. I'll give you the information you need. And so in that particular situation, they go on storm the ship. It was funny to actually see one of the Imperial officers being a complete coward about everything. But they kind of pretty much secured the weapons, and then they stormed that.
It reminded me actually of. And, I know you're going through the synopsis now, and then we're going to go back and actually talk about everything. But
yep.
Pretty much that whole cowardly, just the way that whole scene broke out, it totally reminded me of the Vader end of Rogue One thing, in the sense that they were freaking out. They were trying to get all the doors shut. They were, they were doing all that. And that's kind of what that reminded me of, honestly.
Yeah, definitely. And so, of course, as they're, doing all this, the captain of the ship, pretty much, as they're making their way towards the cockpit or the bridge of the ship, the captain of the ship pretty much, what's the word I'm looking for? Contacts. There we go. Contacts Moff Gideon and kind of lets him know, like, hey, look, this is what happened. And so Gideon's like, well, you know what you got to do. Long live the Empire. He bites like its capsule, like in its tooth or something like that, and that has like cyanide or some sort of poison.
Very,
in it.
very James
Bondish.
Bondish.
Yeah. And yep, he just pretty much commits suicide and kills himself, based because he has knowledge of what's going on. So he didn't want to be put in the position to divulge any information. So after that happens, and the whole point of this is because Bo-Katan is actually looking for the Darksaber. And so because she's looking for the Darksaber, Moff Gideon pretty much kind of figured this out. And so he's like, okay, anybody who can lead these guys to me, has to go. So that's kind of where that ends. So Mando kind of, goes to collect his reward pretty much of information from Bo-Katan. And once that happens, he kind of jetpacks back to retrieve the child that he left with the frog lady, which we all were freaking out about because we were just hoping, like, man, I hope this guy doesn't
just like help himself to the eggs like he did in the second episode.
Exactly.
Which actually caused a lot of controversy. In fact,
yeah,
even Daisy Ridley weighed in on it.
Oh, wow.
Which I thought was hilarious because apparently she's a big fan of the Mandalorian show. Which I don't know if anybody knew about that prior to...
No, I didn't know that either.
All this stuff. But, she came out and she was weighing in on it and stuff like that. And, she was kind of making some jokes about it, which I thought were kind of funny. But, yeah, I mean... This episode actually had a lot. First of all, it was refreshing to see this episode because it finally was starting to advance the main story arc.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I think that we can safely say, maybe not so much with the fourth episode. A little bit. It's got some nuggets in there. But I think a lot of people thought that the second episode, which, man, I can't remember the name of the title of that one.
The one we first introduced to the frog lady.
Right,
much.
right.
Let's see.
I know you got it.
Yep. Just a second.
Do. People are waiting. But that episode, I think a lot of people thought of it more as filler. I think that it even struck me that way. Now, it didn't necessarily bother me that bad, even though I was a little bit disappointed because, they're not releasing these things like the whole season at once.
Right.
They're doing this one episode per week. And the downside of that is that if you get an episode like the second episode, it's kind of disappointing because, okay, I mean, it's cool, but now I got to wait another week until, the new one comes out and I actually get to see... Because again, and this is something that you and I have talked about quite a bit before the season even came out, and that's like, look, guys, you have a lot that you're trying to pack into this thing story-wise.
Right.
And even if you're doing 40, 45-minute episodes, which most of them were,
Thankfully,
you still have a lot you have to do.
Yeah. By the way, the episode's called The Passenger.
The Passenger, that was it. I knew it was something like...
You're
basic. Right. But, again, people rightfully, I think, in some ways, criticize this for being a little bit filler. Now, I think everybody forgets that the story arc goes across the whole season and even across multiple seasons. But everybody forgets that this is an episodic TV series. It's meant to have like little one-off adventures. Mm-hmm. The problem is I think what people's problem is, don't do that. And Dave and I talked about this a little bit, when he was co-hosting the show. And that was like, don't do it on the second episode.
Well, the problem is when you're dealing with, we get that it's an episodic, television type show. The problem is when you don't have that many episodes.
That too.
You can do that when you have like 24 episodes in a standard television program and where you can actually, or 22 or 24, depending. Mm-hmm. So you have that. You have grace to do that with, whereas now you only have 8 to get to the main story. I mean, and especially if they're only, now they're 45 minutes, roughly thereabouts. Now you really have to get into the meat of the matter a lot faster because, you only have so many episodes to tell the story.
Yeah, but of course the other thing too is that one of the nice things about having an 8 or 10 episode season is the fact that it eliminates filler. Because a perfect example is 24. Now, we love the 24 series, but, they'd have like 3 episodes of like Kim Bauer running through the woods and stuff that, had nothing to do with the main storyline. It's like, you know what? You can cut out like 10 of these episodes because when you have 22 or 24 episodes, you actually feel the need to expand it. Like, okay, we have to cover. So it basically invites filler episodes. Whereas an 8 to 10 season, it's like, no, we got to get, like, everything becomes important. So I think that that's the reason why people were really surprised that this episode, other than the fact, and I will say this, the fact the Republic knows who Din Djarin is a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that they got a little bit into that lore is, to me, somewhat huge, and it was purposely done. And I think that what people are going to find, and I said this to Dave at the time too, what people are going to find is that when you're sitting there at only episode 2, it's kind of disappointing. You're like, filler. By the time maybe you get to episode 7, I think maybe episode 2 will have more weight to it.
Yeah, that's what you would hope for. I mean, I think that...
I mean, it's true. Maybe not.
Yeah,
but,
I mean, you know,
what I'm saying, though, right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, you hope that maybe like they'll call back to something like, oh, that's why that.
Right, like because there are certain things that happen during this episode, like the Republic kind of knowing who he is, and he's on their radar, and it was really weird how they treated him because they saved him from that spider creature, but then,
they didn't help him.
They didn't help him. I mean, they basically left him there to die. And it was interesting that in this third episode, they continued on, and they did it in a more meaningful way. They actually had more meat to the regular story. Now we're being introduced to Bo-Katan, which was kind of a big thing. That was something that they had announced that they were going to do because, again, we know about Bo-Katan. We know eventually Ahsoka's supposed to come into it.
Right.
We know the Darksaber. We know a lot of these big things. Boba Fett. It's like, what are they hiding?
Mm-hmm.
And I have a feeling as we go on to episodes 4 or 5 and beyond, the big thing, the thing that they haven't been talking about, is going to be revealed. But until then, it was nice in this episode 3, in this chapter 11, to actually have an episode to where not only was it a good, fun adventure, because I don't know about you, but when that Quarren just like knocked Baby Yoda right into the, and you're just like, whoa,
and that thing jumped up and swallowed it.
Yeah, and you kind of knew they were going to do something, because that's one of the things I really appreciated. There's a couple of things I appreciated about this episode. Number one, I love the look of it.
Yeah.
I like that gray,
that Camino,
kind of gloomy.
Yeah, it had the Camino vibe to it.
Yeah, Sleepy Hollow kind of vibe to it. Actually, all 3 of these episodes kind of had that vibe a little bit, particularly 3 and 5. But, I really enjoyed the vibe and the feel that this one had.
Yeah.
The other thing was, it was ominous. You kind of felt in danger, and I like that.
Yeah, I mean, one, just seeing them on the ship and, they're away from kind of like land or whatever, you're kind of in these guys' elements, really, because, like I said before, the Mon Calamari, you got the Quarren, you got a lot of these creatures that are, this is their natural habitat. So, like, being in the water is, home for them, no different than sand people in the desert. And so the thing is that Mando is not really suited for the water. One, he's got like, probably 30 pounds of steel on.
Or more.
Or
that Beskar is probably kind of heavy.
Yeah, and then on top of that, you got this child with you. You got a helmet on that you don't want to take off. So it's like, if you get knocked into that water, like, how do you really, survive? You can't really survive too long in that thing. So, yeah, I mean, it was very interesting to see him out of his element or in a position where he didn't have necessarily all his resources.
Absolutely.
But then, I was wondering how he's going to get out of that stupid thing.
Yeah, completely. I mean, it's one of those situations where you actually are like, you know what? I don't see a way out for this guy.
Exactly. Yeah, and I like that because, we like seeing our heroes kind of like in a perilous situation. And of course, for once, if it hadn't been for Bo-Katan, that could have been it.
That could have been it. And the thing that was interesting was even before that scene hit, before, the child was knocked into the water, even before that, you could tell something was off.
Yeah, you knew something was about to happen.
And I love that feeling. And I love the fact that they so successfully gave us that feeling because something didn't, you almost were put into his shoes, or boots in this case, in that sense, because you knew something was going to happen and you were trying to feel it and you were trying to,
Yeah, just kind of get us. Your spidey senses are kind of like tingling almost, if you can use that terminology.
Yes. It was one of those things where you knew that danger was there, but you didn't know where it was.
Yeah, like I didn't know if there was something in that thing, or if it's just they were just gonna push him in there and lock him down in there, or like the fact that I just thought they were just gonna shove him down there and just kind of trap him, but I had no idea like this. But then it's all this. Yeah, let the child see this thing, get fed. Or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm just kind of like...
But you know what's funny about that? I actually didn't think anything of that. Like, you would think that would be the big clue. But for me, I was like, okay, yeah, cool. They're letting the kid, I
was kind of wondering because I'm like...
It was like out of nowhere to me when he was knocked in.
This thing is like an infant. Like, it's like an infant. Like, okay, what is this thing really going to remember? Like, if you really think about it. I mean, granted, yeah, he's 50 already, but... they
don't know that.
They don't know that. Exactly. And so I'm like, okay, you're looking at this thing like it's like a newborn. So how are they going to, that's what tipped me off. I'm like, here we go. So yeah, then they said we're going to feed him. I'm like, they're going to feed one of them to this thing. And I thought they were just going to feed the Mandalorian to it and then try to keep the child. That's what I thought was going to happen.
See, and that was exactly where I thought it was going too. I thought it was going to be one of those situations where, they were going to try to kill him and that they were secretly working for Gideon. Mm-hmm. Or maybe they just knew because, there is a bounty on these two.
Exactly.
Or at least on the child. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that was so cool. And that's what made the entrance of Bo-Katan and the other two Mandalorians so special. Now, another thing I thought was interesting is that you saw Sasha Banks.
Mm-hmm.
We saw that trailer scene.
Yep, her on the docks.
Her on the docks. And, of course, this is the big moment that we're going, okay, is she playing Sabine?
Mm-hmm.
Because, again, we're like, okay, it would make sense for Sabine to be in The Mandalorian.
True.
Now, of course, we found out very quickly that she's not Sabine. In fact, I forgot what her character's name was.
I don't think they gave it to us, though.
Yeah, they said they introduced themselves. But, I mean, honestly, for me personally, I didn't really care. It's one of those things that if those two rise to prominence again, like if they're featured in some more episodes, then I'll commit. This is one of those things where it separates both of us from a lot of, like, the hardcore Star Wars fans. Even though I consider myself a hardcore fan, because let's face it, I've read a lot of the comics, the books, the movies. I'm doing a show. I mean, if you're committing to doing a show every week, you're probably a pretty big fan. But I'm one of those guys, though, that I was more about it as a kid, especially when I was collecting the figures and stuff like that. But it's like, as I got older, I didn't necessarily care about memorizing every name of every character and every vehicle and every this and every that.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It's like when you're an adult, you actually have other things that you have to remember. And being that I'm very involved in production, it's like there's a lot of things I have to try to keep up on.
Definitely.
Minor Star Wars characters is really, to be honest, not on my radar. So it's one of those situations where if those two come up again, then, maybe, yeah, okay, I'll figure out who they are, right? But for now, I haven't. But knowing that they're just minor characters, even though I will contradict myself in a way, because I will commit to it if I realize that this is a character from the old expanded universe.
Well, that's because you've already kind of committed that anyway.
Well, yeah.
It's already kind of like...
Well, yes and no, though, because it could be a character that maybe it was from a book I didn't read, or they were a minor character even in the book. But the fact that they were an established character, then I would probably pay a little bit more attention. Until then, though, it's like, I mean, I don't want to say I don't care, but I'm not as invested in that particular bit of trivial knowledge, as it were.
So Sasha Banks' character is Koska Reeves.
Yeah, okay, that's right.
That's her name.
So, what about the other dude?
The other Mandalorian.
Yeah.
Let's see.
But while you're saying that, I thought that their entrance was great. I thought it was fabulous. I thought that if you're going, because one of the things, of course, that we were always wondering is how are they going to bring these guys in?
Yeah, I mean, now one thing I will say is that, and I'm gonna get your opinion on this. Did she like? I was marveling at the fact that she really did look like Bo-Katan from like the Clone Wars.
Oh
like,
yeah,
like I mean, they got her like spot
Yep.
on. Like it was literally like a live. Like she just like stepped out of a cartoon or something, and it was like, yep.
Well, and I think it begged the question too. Like, I know a lot of people were once it was announced that Ahsoka would be brought into live action, and then Rosario Dawson's name was thrown out there as being officially cast. I remember I was jumping for joy because she was the one that, like years ago, while the Clone Wars was actually still on, by the way, because Rosario Dawson actually came onto my radar from Josie and the Pussycats, of all things, believe it or not. And I'd seen a couple of her other movies, and, I always respected her as an actress, but I always thought once I saw the character in the Clone Wars, I'm like, man, if they ever brought her into live action, that's the actress that should play her. Now, a lot of people were upset that, unlike Katie Sackhoff, they did not ask Ashley Eckstein to portray the live-action character.
right.
And it's like, maybe they could have made her look like the live-action character, but, seeing a lot of the production stills and all that stuff,
Yeah.
I just think that it's a smarter choice to actually go with somebody, because there was a lot of talk of, are they going to have Ashley dub the voice? Kind of like what they did to Ray Park, where he played the character of Darth Maul, but he didn't do the voice. Mm-hmm. And that could have been something they could have done, but that would have been kind of cheesy, I think.
Yeah.
Ronaldo says, it is my second favorite episode. That Mandalorian armor translates well to live action, and the action was very well handled. Yeah, I totally agree. It was amazing, first of all, how well, like you pointed out, that they actually did get. I mean, it was literally like
She walked off.
the animated version just walked off of the drawing or the computer or whatever and right into live action. Mm-hmm. And it's so rare that you can have a voice actor. I mean, granted, I know Katie Sackhoff is actually an actress. It's not like she's just a voice actor, but at the same time, the look, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It's very rare that you can have somebody who does the voice acting actually nail the look of the character.
And you almost have to wonder, like, did they model the character's look after her?
I would think so. I would think so only because she's a known actress. Mm-hmm. Who, ironically enough, and I didn't know this, I knew she was in it, but I didn't know it was her first movie. I did not know that Halloween Resurrection was her first movie. And she doesn't look as recognizable. There's this hilarious video on YouTube, because she has her own YouTube channel.
Okay.
And she did a reaction video to Halloween Resurrection, which was great. Like, she was telling some stories, like, behind the scenes stuff, and then, like, okay, this is a decision I would make, but I didn't know. I was new, and, it was really cool. And it was nice to see her just, she's not made up. She's just, like, in jeans and a T-shirt. She's just looking normal.
Right.
And it's great to see an actress like that. And that's why it was really nice that she was able to portray this character.
Oh, yeah, definitely. One of the things that, I loved about this episode was that you had different types of, different types of Imperial. So you had, like, the captain, very stern. He was very by the book. You can tell he was really into the military aspect. The other guy in the back of the ship looked like he was just drafted, and he was like, look, I'm not even trying to be here.
Well, but again, and you bring up an excellent point. I'm glad you did, because I wouldn't have thought of this otherwise, but you do start to see now the different various levels of devotion to the Empire, that there's a lot of these guys that are not, it's not as two-dimensional as what they were portrayed in the trilogies.
Yeah.
Because the original trilogy in particular, because that was the Empire, right? So you basically get this almost black and white type villain. they're all ultra devoted to the Empire. It was almost like this Nazi regime, which is what it was modeled after. So naturally, the officers were modeled after that too. Although it should be pointed out, there were a lot of people in Nazi Germany who, they really weren't clued in, or they were purposely just sort of looking the other way. They weren't overzealous for the cause, let's say. They were doing it because either they had to do it or it was a job.
Right.
This is what you're doing. This is what your nation's doing. So, okay. And I have a feeling that that's what it was like in the Empire, too. But now we're seeing that. It's 6 years after the Empire fell. Some of these guys are probably like, you know what? I don't know if I'm 100% on board with the mission, but,
Right.
What else am I going to do? Where am I going to go?
Right. What
I mean,
job do I have to
and I
qualify
think,
for?
yes, and I think that the most important point here is the fact that they wanted to maintain order.
Yeah.
Because it was in... that was probably an episode 4 thing, so I'll hold that off.
Okay.
I'll hold that off. But it's interesting that... No, it wasn't. It wasn't. It was episode 1. It was the whole Cobb Vanth thing. As soon as the Empire fell,
Yeah.
boom, these pirates just take over the town.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they're still announcing it on television.
Mm-hmm.
And these
Couldn't
guys
wait.
are like, all right, Empire's gone, we're taking over. And this is a very real thing in this universe that, they have to deal with that. And so for some of these people, they might not necessarily... First of all, not everybody's privy to the whole Moff Gideon. He's got the Darksaber. He's trying to create whatever he's trying to do. Whatever his ultimate plan is, a lot of these guys weren't clued in on it.
Yeah, Ronaldo makes a good point too. He says, it seems to me a nice touch that the pilots
We'll get through it. We'll get
Right.
through it.
that the pilots of the ship were young and fearful. That shows that the Empire lacks experienced members after its defeat.
Yeah, that is a good point, actually, because again, they're pretty much almost in the same boat that the Rebel Alliance was in when they started. Where it's kind of like, okay, anybody that has any flying experience at all, like half of them were farmers.
Yeah, it was like the Independence Day
It was
thing.
basically, like Independence Day. They just didn't go through with the whole, anybody that knows how to fly. But that's essentially what it was.
Mm-hmm.
You had maybe some people that were experienced from the Clone Wars and, they were part of the Republic or whatever. But, most of those guys were just farm boys or... recreational flyers, maybe a couple of smugglers here and there. Who knows? But the point is most of them were just from other walks of life that believed in the cause.
Yep, or just needed a job, honestly.
Yeah, or just
especially
needed a
after
job.
the Empire fell. It's like, okay, well, I need something.
Yeah. And it's a reasonable conclusion.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the things that they're doing this season that's very good, that has been continuing throughout the season actually, is portraying these people as like, look, they're not necessarily believers in the cause. They're there for the paycheck.
Yeah.
Or that's all they know.
Mm-hmm. Now, even watching, not the Mon Calamari, the Quarren, like they're more of the aggressive, dark, seedy kind of creatures of the aquatic world, if I may. And they've always kind of been portrayed as that, even in the Clone Wars animation.
Mm-hmm.
When they had that whole, I guess, series of episodes where they were trying to win that whole battle, and they were working with the actual, not the Trade Federation, but the Separatist movement. So, just seeing that actually, once again, transcribed to live action, where you kind of get that they really did look like the Quarren that we saw from the animation, and they really still had that same attitude. It's not like, oh, this is a certain group of them. It kind of seems like they're all like that. Like they're all kind of just these grumpy squids, they're just kind of...
Well, and again, I think that one of the nice things what the Mandalorian is doing as the seasons, because they started this basically in one, but it has been progressing, and that is that they're really taking the lore and they're expanding it.
Yeah.
And they're expanding it and taking it into new directions. So you're really getting the best of both worlds. You're getting a little bit of the nostalgia, but you're getting that new direction. And I think that ultimately, even though nobody really thought about it or at least expressed it that I saw, because usually you have two camps. You have people that want to see the continuing adventures of all these people, and then this one's the son of this one, and on it goes. Or you have people that are like, no, let's go in a completely brand new direction, clean slate, brand new characters and everything else. The Mandalorian actually did the best of both. It's giving us the familiar, but in a new setting, with a new set of circumstances, and it's expanding on characters that maybe we saw in other medium, but never really got to see in this context.
Right. Almost kind of what we wanted to see in the sequel trilogy.
Yeah, imagine that. I mean, honestly, yes, the Mandalorian essentially is how the sequel trilogy should have been handled.
Right. Now, when going back to this episode, I like the fact that they changed Baby Yoda's perspective on the eggs. Because before he just kind of saw them as food, and then now it seemed like he started to understand what they were and who they...
He's probably thinking like, "Oops."
Yeah, but he's all like trying to play with them now, and like the frog, and the fact that the frog family pretty much are just, they're kind of embracing him and just kind of like, yeah, we'll watch out for him. And
I'm waiting for the sitcom.
I know, right?
You know what? That was almost getting to me. Like, it was giving me holiday special flashbacks, though. I'm like, okay, are we going to see these guys speaking in their little frog language for like 20 minutes?
Right, exactly.
I mean, this is going to be a little bit strange.
The Empire knocks on the door.
Right, yeah, exactly. Is it Life Day?
Right.
Or whatever it is for the little tadpoles. But yeah,
Cool
I mean, it was really cool. It was great to see that because, again, these are the kinds of things that we don't get to see too much. We've talked about Ahsoka's growth because she's really the only character in Star Wars that you see from pretty much the very beginning. And I know a lot of people might be tempted to say Luke, but Luke was already kind of who he was.
Yeah, and he was already like 17, 18 years old
when
we first meet him.
Yeah, where, Ahsoka's probably more like 14, 15, maybe even a little younger.
I think she's probably like 12, honestly.
Or 13. Yeah, she could be. Ronaldo.
Yeah, I really thought he was going to eat that tadpole.
I did too.
We did. And I think, and I remember there was like a lot of backlash about,
oh yeah,
him eating those, eggs, and everybody was kind of like trying to boycott Baby Yoda all of a sudden. And it's just like, he went from the most beloved, cutest thing in the world and
cancel culture, man.
Yeah, man. Like he's about to like Times Magazine.
The SJWs are out there.
Time Magazine's like, Creature of the Year or something like that. And then all of a sudden, everybody's just like, oh no, burn Baby Yoda,
Well, and this could actually be the topic. Like, we could do this as a main topic of the show, but it used to be that Star Wars was somewhat isolated from the more social norms of, whatever the society might be at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But you're starting to see through a lot of things in The Mandalorian and a little bit that it's not isolated.
Well, I mean, George Lucas always kind of wanted that to happen anyway.
Well, in representative, but I'm talking about like, okay, Baby Yoda eats some eggs, and now everybody wants
him taken off the show.
Yeah, or like Gina Carano posts some comments that people don't like, and suddenly they want her fired.
Well, yeah. Well, I think that's just because these things are accessible to people now. So yeah.
Well, and that's one of the. I guess that's one of the more downsides of social media is that you can look and, one of the things that it does, and this is why I always say that it is good when actors aren't necessarily too involved in it because, and it was something that somebody, I don't remember who it was, said this, but an actor basically said that if you know too much about them, it takes away their ability to fully be able to portray a character because now you're not seeing the character, you're seeing the person.
Mm-hmm.
So,
definitely.
Yeah, that if you're too active on social media, it's like on one hand, yeah, you want to be accessible to your fans, but on the other hand, you don't want to be too accessible or too known because it bleeds in. But it just goes to show you, though, that, things are nobody's just saying, hey, this is, because you're right, the whole Baby Yoda thing, they were really,
Yeah.
even though for me, and I remember when we did the review on the episode, it was kind of dark. I remember watching it, with one of my friends, and he was like, he's going to eat the eggs. I'm like, oh, no way. I'm like, no way. That would be too dark and too grim. They're not going to go there. And then they went there.
Multiple times.
And they did it probably 40 seconds after I made the comment. I'm like, oh, well, I guess they are going to go there. And it was interesting because it shows you that, first of all, it makes perfect sense why he would do it.
Of course.
Everybody's yapping about that, but it's you're about to go to the store and buy your eggs. Where do you think they're coming from?
Yeah.
Now, granted, you're not hanging out with a chicken, eating their eggs in front of them, and
Right.
they're not as they can't use universal translators and
Yeah. And so, but see, here's the thing, though. And this is one of the cool things about Star Wars, even in The Mandalorian. Okay, we've seen definitely the growth of the Mandalorian himself.
Mm-hmm.
But in a way, you can kind of say you've even seen the growth of Baby Yoda.
Absolutely, and I think you're going to continue to
see. Yeah, and I think you're going to continue to see that because I think it's it's almost becoming as much of his story as it is the Mandalorian's.
Oh, I don't doubt that that's where they're going to take it. What's interesting to me is, and I've often said that this whole thing about whatever the Empire's planning for them and all these things, I think that's going to be wrapped up at the end of this season. But what's interesting, I could be wrong though. It could actually go another season, but I don't think it's going to. But I do think though that they're going to now take all this stuff and then go to the next level and see the next level of growth for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the fact that so far, you see people coming in and out. Because one of the problems that I always had with the Batman series, let's say, the movies, is the fact that, they were bringing in all these characters, and it's like, okay, now you got to give the origin story to everybody. You have to do all this stuff. By bringing in characters that will show up, and then they're not there for the next episode.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe they come in later. They did that last season.
Yep.
So I think that that's cool because you're keeping the focus on Din Djarin and the child. And it's going to be ultimately about their journey as individuals, but also their journey together.
Right.
And then people that we know and love and people that we're introduced to, like a Grief Karga, they're going to come in and out as the story dictates. But it's not like they introduce a character and all of a sudden now they're in every episode too. I like the fact they're not doing that.
Yeah, you hit the nail right on the head. The fact that they can kind of bring you in and then that allows you to see their growth and development over time. And we'll talk about that in some other episodes we have coming up. But yeah, you really do get a chance to really see, and I think that's the whole thing about Star Wars too. Is one of the things is it's always been about growth. When you look at Luke Skywalker, you look at Princess Leia, Han, they all grew, in their own respective ways. Leia, learned not to be so hard and so tough. She knew how to be sensitive when she needed to be, and then she still kept her strong will and her determination. You saw Luke actually grow from being kind of an annoying little scrawny kid farm boy to a strong, confident, young Jedi Knight. Han wasn't so selfish. He grew into being someone more compassionate. You saw the softer sides of him later on. So, I think that, like I said, Star Wars has always been about that growth. Even Lando, saying you saw different things.
I think Lando was actually one of the biggest. You can point to any of the other characters like you just did, but I think Lando was probably the most obvious.
Yeah.
Because first of all, he was introduced in the middle of the second act, and then of course he carries into the end of the third act. But the thing is that he really went through, I think, a lot of growth, even though it's interesting because you don't really see it until you see Solo. because then you get a little bit of a vibe of what Lando was like beforehand.
Yeah, I mean, but when you kind of even see the fact that he kind of had it all, like he was the guy running Cloud City, he was like pretty much, he was
Well, he
the
had it
man.
all till the Empire took it from him.
And that's what I'm saying. So then it's like, okay, now he kind of had to fight for everything now that he wanted, and he still maintained his kind of savvy, slick ways of, acquiring certain things
He's basically like the other side of the Han coin.
yeah.
His growth is actually very much like Han's growth.
Mm-hmm.
And it also mirrors Finn in a lot of ways as well.
Yeah. Trying
Because
to find their place.
Yeah, they're trying to find their place, or they're basically on. Now, in Finn's case, he was trying to run away from his past and forge something new, and then he got pretty much roped into this cause, and then he realized this is where he needed to be. Whereas Han and Lando were pretty much accidentally, had this cause pretty much run into them, and then they had to make the conscious decision: do they go and
Stick with it?
Yeah, or do they stick with it? Do they say, you know what? I need to do something bigger than myself. And of course they chose the latter, so that's why we get that. And you see, of course, Lando's growth even further once you hit the Rise of Skywalker.
Definitely.
So yeah, that part's cool. I mean, I just think that they did a really good job in this episode of finally giving you a little bit more meat because, they kicked everything off so well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they gave us basically episode 1, boom, Boba Fett, Cobb Vanth, who's like, from the Aftermath trilogy. So they're giving you like canonized new novel stuff. And they essentially told his story in a slightly different and abbreviated way. I mean, it was great.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get The Passenger and you're like, okay, it was, I guess from a standalone episode point, it was cool, but there really wasn't a whole lot that happened, and it wasn't really necessary that we know of.
Well, I think the biggest thing was like the whole New Republic, actually, because, showing up and
yeah, and that was the purpose of it. And it's so funny, too, because and John Campea never fails to shock me. He loved that episode. He thought The Passenger was like the greatest thing. And he had a lot of good points in defense about it. Which really amazed me because I'm like, oh, he had to have hated this thing. He's going to call it filler, all this, but he didn't. And he actually pointed out a lot of things, some of the things that I had already pointed out. And then he pointed out some other stuff too. And, because another thing that you see in The Passenger is the fact that that's the first time you truly see the child bonding with Din.
Yeah.
And that there's really a legitimate bond there. And then it's going to grow from there. But you kind of see that. And then, of course, that's spilling over because we didn't really mention this at the beginning of this, but episode 3 or chapter 11 is really a direct sequel. You really have to think of 2 and 3 as one big episode.
Mm-hmm. And I like the fact that, like, in the Eris episode, even with, it's cool how, like, Mando kind of, like, meets people, and then he kind of just, all right, they usually have him do some sort of job for them. Like, that's kind of like the theme, like, all right, meet somebody new, got to do another job for him. And then, it's like, all right, what do you need me to do just to get the information I want?
What's weird? You know what if you really stop and think about this series, you know what it's like? It's like these RPG games.
Mm-hmm.
So you're playing, say, Elder Scrolls, right? And you have the main quest. But then along the way, you might meet some people, and in trying to do the main quest, you have to do these side quests, so that way you can get information for the main quest.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much how it is. He's like, okay, just go, see this person or whatever. Well, then you go to meet him up. They're like, okay, well, I'll give you the info, but I need you to do some for me first. And that usually takes them either to an entirely new planet or something else. And this passenger thing is a perfect example.
Well, yeah, like even with, the Eris is like when he's meeting Bo-Katan and, they're all sitting around and she's kind of explaining everything to him. Like, okay, well, you had this faction of Mandalore that was doing this. And then, we're from Mandalore. We don't do the whole, not removing the helmet thing. Like that's, you guys' whole deal. And, just kind of break it. And I like how they kind of broke things down, but they still ended up respecting each other. Like, okay, even though we're from two different styles of Mandalore, so to speak, I still respect you. And they actually were able to, accomplish this mission together. And then, you kind of saw Mandalorian, man. He was actually like taking some shots, like as he was trying to like let those detonators go. I mean, that Beskar steel, man, was holding up. I'm just like,
yeah, well, and that's the other thing that I like too. I like it when you see him really just kicking a bunch of butt. You know, like you see that he actually is a skilled fighter. Because sometimes, and this is one of my complaints in the first season, and I brought it up in some of those reviews. It's like you're underpowering this guy a little bit. I mean, I get it. You're trying not to make him, the Mandalorian version of Luke Skywalker or something.
RoboCop or something.
Yeah, exactly. Like you're not trying to overpower him, but come on, man. I mean, you can't make him that. He's obviously like this really highly skilled bounty hunter.
Right.
So you have to give him that. And I really like that Bo-Katan scene because it was something that we had always thought of. I was like, well, wait a minute. Because remember, we thought that the reason why they didn't take their helmets off was because this is after the Purge. They were driven extremely underground. You had all these different things, so we thought that's what it was. And then it's like, no, that's not it at all. So that was a surprise to me. And then it was great that they gave that little bit of exposition. So, and it's not just to Din himself, because it's giving him a little bit more pieces of his past and where he's from, but it's also giving the audience, like, hey, this is why these guys aren't taking off their helmets, but remember us from the Clone Wars?
Yeah.
We're still kind of how we always were. And you're right. They totally nailed their look, and it was just priceless, man. It was great. I loved it. So if you had to rate this episode,
I would give it a out of 10.
Yeah,
I would give it an 8.
That's about where I'm at too.
Yeah, I would give it an 8. Yep.
I mean, we could have duel the fates it, but no, I would too. I would give it a solid 8, man. I think that it advanced the story arc, which I think that we were at the point where we really needed this to happen. It introduced a character in a way that could have sucked, but actually was done very well. It gave us a really good adventure. It gave us some more information. I mean, it was really a nice, well-rounded...
It was packaged well.
Yeah, it was packaged well. Now, let me ask you this, though. Were you disappointed that Sasha Banks was not Sabine?
Yes.
Now, do you think that they can actually bring Sabine in still?
They could.
I know, you're just like, well, they can do anything.
Yeah,
I mean, it's true, but I mean...
I think they still could. I mean, because... See, I could see it happening because you still have that fight for the battle of like, okay, who leads Mandalore then? Is it going to be Bo-Katan or is it going to be Sabine? You could still bring that in. Like, they both could be hunting for the Darksaber.
So what do you think are the, what percentage would you give it that they bring her in?
I'll say 40.
I will go 60, but... I don't think they're going to bring her in this season.
Okay.
I think it'll be a season 3 thing.
Okay, I can see that.
I would say 20% on this season, maybe even 15.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like, I thought you were talking about like this season.
Yeah, well, I know. I didn't clarify it.
Yeah.
And Ronaldo basically gives it an 8 out of 10.
Yep. So he agrees with us.
He agrees with us.
He agrees.
I would like to say it's a shock, but Ronaldo's always in there with us. Although sometimes he agrees with you a little too much, but I'm going to let that go.
Ronaldo's my guy.
Exactly. You're like PayPaling him,
exactly.
every week or
Your
whatever.
Cash App will be ready, Ronaldo.
But, as usual, let us know in the comment section what you guys thought of this episode. I realize this is like 2 weeks after, like every other YouTuber in the world did their whole thing on this episode like 2 weeks ago. But hey, we're the ones that actually get in and really discuss it. They just kind of give you, a bunch of stuff. Or then there's people that do the Easter egg videos, which I love to watch, but I'm just not that guy. I can never make one of those videos because you got to go like frame by frame and
we
like
stay in our lane.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we're the Star Wars philosophical character study discussion channel. So, again, let us know in the comments section what you guys thought of episode 3. We're going to, of course, move on to the other episodes, which you can still chat what you guys think of episode 3 because, you know, it's a cumulative thing.
Mm-hmm.
So let us know, and that'll be that. What do we got next?
All right, man. So next we have episode 4 or chapter 12.
You got to keep this straight.
Yeah, got to keep it straight in my head. Known as The Siege.
The Siege. Now, this is actually a pretty big episode. Now, so tell me, are you going to give every bit as an exhaustive? Is like the first 15 minutes going to be you just telling us the story?
No, I'll make it easy on everybody. So, essentially, The Siege is Mandalorian Baby Yoda kind of returned back to Navarro for repairs to their ship and run back into Grief Karga and Marshal Cara Dune. And
yeah, that was interesting.
So she's the new Marshal of Navarro, and they've changed some things. You know, Navarro's definitely changed. They put a school in where, you know, that was a whole bar. And, you know, they've just really renovated some things, and he's really trying to move things up. Also, Grief looks a little bit different. He's got a little gray around the whiskers now. So I guess he ran out of just for me men on over there on Navarro. But then they once again, Mandalorians need some repairs to his ship, which always seems to be breaking down.
Always. That thing breaks down more than the Falcon.
I know, man. So then now he has, this task of going to this particular stronghold that they have on the other side of Navarro. That was where all the Imperials came from before, and they want to destroy it because there's a lot of cache weapons there. They're trying to sell on the black market, and basically Grief Karga is really trying to just free Navarro and just make it like a trade planet, and just do the whole money thing. What I thought was cool though was that you saw the guy from the very first season.
Yeah, that was really cool that they brought him back.
Yeah, brought him back. The guy, the Mandalorian,
the guy that was like going to be frozen or whatever.
Yeah, he trapped him the first time, and he brought him back, and now he's working for Grief Karga, working off his debt, which is like substantial. It's like 350 years or something.
Yeah, because he keeps going, we'll knock another 100 years off. We'll knock another 30 years off for this. And yeah, I thought that was really cool. And this is something that's worth mentioning as well, because I remember when I first saw him in the first season, I was a little skeptical about how the show was going to be, because I was just like, man, is this going to be one of these almost slapsticky Marvel humor-ish type of thing? Are they going to try to continue with that? And his character was cool, but I have to say that I loved the character a lot more in this episode.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And I thought it was great that they brought him back, because he's a character I was not necessarily asking for.
No, but I mean, you kind of, he served a purpose. And, of course, you had cute moments. Baby Yoda's in school with all the rest of the kids, so that was funny.
Yeah, and then having to use the Force to
steal the boys' cookies.
Mm-hmm.
Those little macarons. And then, so they pretty much go on this whole, mission where they have to go into destroy this whole base. And when they get into the base, they kind of realize this is not a base just as a military base, but it's actually more than that, which they find out to be a lab. And they also find out that Gideon is still alive. And so then now there's like, okay, we got bigger problems on our hand. And they also realize that he's still looking for the child.
Well, the thing that I really like going into a lot of the things, because that seems to be how we're handling it. We're going over some of the stuff we like, some of the stuff we don't like. Mm-hmm. Maybe not in any particular order, but
yep.
I really love the way this thing started.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was cool, and just seeing how Grief Karga is like Grandpa Karga almost, because he's like, oh, little one, and he's all so happy to see him. He's all talking to him like a baby, like, is Mando taking care of you? He says, yeah. I mean, it's just like, who are you now?
Yeah, but don't forget there was that whole scene though where he went in and like at the very beginning when he went in and strung that guy up.
And no, in the Siege?
Yeah.
Which guy?
Well, actually, no, maybe it wasn't.
Yeah, that was the other one.
Yeah, that was the other one. That was like the first episode?
Yeah.
Yeah. But it was similar, though. Because there was something where he was doing that I remember.
Apparently not.
But I mean, you're right, though. The fact that, and this goes back to something that I brought up in the last episode, which is, again, you have the recurrence of characters.
Yeah.
Cara Dune and Grief Karga were both characters that were introduced into the first season, and they kind of weighed pretty heavily in that season.
Right.
But yet, this is the first appearance of them, and we're on the 4th episode.
Right. And,
Which I love that, because it's like you don't have to cram. This is what I always hated about having a keyboardist in a band. That's why I never wanted to have a keyboard player in a band. You're probably like, okay, where's he going?
Wrong show.
Yeah, right. That's your other channel. But no, because the problem with hiring a keyboardist and having a keyboardist be the official member of the band is now suddenly every song that you write has to have keyboards in it. Because it's unfathomable for the keyboard player to just not play during a song. It's sort of like if they're an official member of the band, they're going to be playing a company, whatever. Whereas if you just, maybe you have keyboards on some songs, you don't on others, then you hire a guy to tour, it's understood. And this is a mistake that a lot of times they end up making on a TV series, is the fact that once you introduce a character and they're a regular character, now they got to be in every episode. But they resist the temptation to do that, and I love that. Because like you said, we see Grief and we see Cara now, there's been some growth. They have a slightly different appearance. In Cara's case, she has a different job. Grief is doing something different. There's been growth. It kind of goes back to what you talked about in the last episode. You're actually seeing a lot of growth in these characters.
I think the scene you were referring to, though, when you said someone was getting strung up, I think you're talking about when Cara pretty much walked in on the Walrus Man crew.
Yeah, that's
probably what you were talking about.
Yeah, I was getting him confused, but I knew there was a whole prologue, and that was it.
Yeah.
It was kind of when she went in, and there was all the Walrusmen people.
And she saved a little meerkat squirrel thing. From getting
eaten. She went in and kicked a lot of butt and stuff like that, and it was cool. It was good to see that growth plays right into what we're talking about. That you actually have this whole thing now to where she's actually belonging somewhere. And this is, I think, a direct result of her being with the Mandalorian for a while.
Yeah, she's laid down the law. She sees that, these people.
Yeah, I mean, because she was wandering. She was practically running, trying to lay low. Now she's like, you know what? I got to put roots down somewhere. And
why not be here and start something brand new? And I got to, I have a position and everything. One of the things I did enjoy about this is at the very beginning, Mando and Grief are kind of talking about his run-in with the New Republic, and he was just like, they should stay out of this, that the Empire couldn't, keep the Outer Rim. What makes them think that they can? And so that and it kind of, goes into the end of the show when the New Republic does show up once again, and it's that same guy too. It's like, he's kind of like this weird like detective or something that just keeps popping up.
Yeah, I think it's great that they have these recurring New Republic character guys now, and they're giving you a picture, which did not happen last season. They're giving you a picture of what the New Republic's role is in this part of the universe.
Yeah, they're really trying to establish, some order and control. And so that you can see the power struggle between them, the Empire, and then just the general lawlessness in the galaxy anyway. And so they're trying to put out a bunch of fires at one time, and it's kind of difficult. So just seeing that, okay, they're trying to be cool to some people, but then they're like, okay, other times we have to lay down the law. So I thought that was really interesting. And then once they got into the whole mission, the comedy between, I don't even know what the little blue guild guys, I'll look it up. But,
yeah, I know. He was so funny. He was legitimately hilarious in this episode to me. I thought he was just, there were like so many really great one-liners. I wish I can remember some of them, but there were so many great.
It's like park your gills, right? Or you're like, I'm going to let you walk back with whatever's left in your humidity vest. And I'm just like, And he's like, okay, well, that's not leaving me much of an option there.
But yeah, I mean, there was even funny moments though between, because Din always has some funny lines in a lot of the episodes too. And I mean, that's another thing that I love about this show is that it's very character driven and there's a camaraderie with them, and I like that. I like the fact that they do that. There's sort of like and you get this feel on a lot of, like, you and I watch Frasier all the time. Back when they had Wings or Cheers or, Seinfeld or, I mean, Friends, you name it. It's all those ensemble shows.
Yeah.
And they basically have this bond. There's like this chemistry that they have.
Mm-hmm.
The good ones I'm talking about.
Right.
Where you basically feel it and you actually feel a part of that world while you're watching it. And in a lot of cases, in my case especially, I mean, if I'm feeling, a little bit anxious or something, I'll go watch those shows because it's almost like you're in that world now. And The Mandalorian, it's doing the same thing. It's like you have these group of people, particularly when he gets with Cara and Grief, where there's this almost ensemble cast bond with those guys.
Yeah, they're kind of like, they automatically kind of sync together.
Yeah.
And as they're taking on the stronghold for the remnants of the Empire, and of course the mind throw, that's what the guy is. They're just he's kind of like the comedic relief, but he's, of course he kind of has a stake in this stuff too. And, once again, you're seeing the Mandalorian kick some butt. He's launching, stormtroopers off the balcony of this thing, man. And, he's laying waste to everybody. And you're just like, okay, that's what I'm talking about. And then as they start to progress, you start to find out, okay, that this base is more than just a base. It's actually a lab. And then you actually see the communication from that one doctor. And now you're starting to see another big piece of that puzzle where he's saying, okay, well, the test thing that we tried to do failed. We only had so much blood we took from the child. He's so small that we only could get so much at one time, but we've exhausted all that, so we will need the host again.
Yeah, but did you catch the part where he said the M count was low?
Yes, the M count. Yeah, it's like,
So midi-chlorians are coming back.
Yep.
But again, this is one of the things that the Mandalorian is doing really well, is the fact that they're bringing in stuff from all eras, whether it's the prequels, the original trilogy, the Clone Wars animated series, Rebels, maybe not Resistance. Resistance happens like way later, but yeah. I mean, they're actually bringing in, some of the stuff from the books, because like I mentioned, Cobb Vanth was like an Aftermath trilogy guy, and they're bringing in a lot of stuff from the lore that I love, but they're doing it okay. So I have to almost wonder, will they give us midi-chlorians in a way that we don't hate?
Maybe. And
Dave and I had a pretty spirited discussion about the whole thing on the last show.
I'm sure anytime we bring up midichlorians, it's always going to be a spirited conversation.
Well, I mean, because the thing is that I think he was talking about where, some of it made sense. And it was, well, you and I had generally both of us are kind of like, we could have lived without it, but,
yeah, it wasn't necessary to really do, but
it wasn't necessary to do. But once it was there, I think where our thing came from was the fact that it was like, okay, neither one of us thought it was necessary, but you were able to hang with it a little bit more than I was at first.
Yeah, I mean, I think the midichlorian thing is, like I said, it was unnecessary.
You said it was an explanation that works.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like, okay, well, does the Force, like, okay, well, there's these cells that live within all living beings or whatever. Like, okay, if you have a certain count, it just means you're more, adapt to,
or maybe susceptible to the Force, whatever.
Yeah, to the Force. It's no different than, like, all right, if you have a gene in your family where, like, okay, you're more susceptible to be tall, or it's
and
kind
again,
of like the same thing.
Even though we're going to end up rehashing this discussion now. But pretty much my whole thing was, and again, I agree with all that. I mean, it's kind of like, as an explanation on its own, I don't necessarily have a problem with it. My problem with it is they're dropping more sci-fi into Star Wars where it doesn't belong. It's no different than you watch Lord of the Rings. They don't have a blood test for the magic for Gandalf. You don't need it. It's a fantasy.
Right.
And it takes away the fantasy element. And even though you can oh, what's the word? It begins with an R. This is like grammar. Not resolve. Oh man, it's like now we got to play $100,000 pyramid where it's like, it begins with. But basically, like you're aligning what Obi-Wan was saying and this whole midi-chlorian thing, because the Obi-Wan explanation in episode 4 was perfect. And it was more the fantasy explanation. Now, the point that you had made on that show, which I think was when we were talking about the nature of the Force, the point that you made was that it's not so much that it contradicts it as much as it just explains it in a scientific way.
Or it just expounds upon it. It's
or expounds on it.
Because it doesn't really, like I said, it doesn't take away from what Obi-Wan said. It's just saying that this is what causes that to happen. Like, this is the energy. This is what the energy field is drawn from.
And that's why I didn't like it because of what it was doing. But I mean, I can hang with it. It wasn't like I was.
But like you said, it's not necessary. Like, either way it went, it's not like people were really wondering, like, where did the Force come from? We just accepted that that's what it was, and that's it.
And that's all you had to do, right?
Right, and I get it.
And it's better if you keep it like that, because my biggest point was that if you start to try to scientifically explain stuff, now you're going to paint yourself into some corners.
Right.
If you keep it vague and very mystical and whatever, you don't have to explain as much. Ronaldo says, a little fact, the droid that was in the school mentions Chandrila as the capital of the New Republic. Again, it seems they don't ignore canon. Of course they don't ignore canon, because it's Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau. These are the guys that basically embrace canon. They kind of bring it in.
Yep, group hug.
They love canon. They love the books. They love all this stuff. This is why everybody was really excited to get these guys. I mean, Filoni himself is practically a source of canon at this point, because number one, he's sort of picked up where Lucas left off with the Clone Wars, Rebels. He's one of the guys that's basically contributing to a lot of these things. And I think that that's important. Now I'm going to bring in, Ronaldo, your other comment, because I kind of wanted to save it. He says, so was that Snoke?
Was who Snoke?
So if you actually look,
the test thing.
If you look at the end where Gideon was, you see like some in the background. You do see like these like super battle death trooper guys, which that looks cool.
Yeah,
I want to know what those dudes are all about.
And they look like they're made by Dodge.
Yeah,
had the 3 stripes, the red stripes.
Don't say that. It means I'm gonna have to actually probably work on another reveal. Introducing the new Battle Super... But the thing is, you saw some Snoke-like creatures in the lab before that.
Oh, yeah, and a little...
Kind of very similar to how it was in Palpatine. Yeah. And they looked exactly like Snoke. And yeah, I don't know if that was Snoke himself, because we don't know how many Snokes he went through before he got to Snoke. Snoke it. You know, if you're just caught snoking after work, you know.
Smoking some crack.
Smoking some crack, yeah, exactly. I mean, but again, we don't know how many times he snoked up before he got to Snoke.
How many Snokes could have smoked Snoke?
Yeah, I know,
it's like wood. Like, it's like one of those crazy little tongue twisters.
It totally is, man. But I mean, again, I
know, right?
It's
what
true,
else?
though.
What else
it's like,
do?
What else are you gonna do? Because we don't know. Were those, and this is where the canon question comes into play. It's like, were each of those a version of Snoke that didn't? Okay, that one failed. Let's make another one. Or were they all different beings? But Snoke
actually
was the one that actually,
survived,
I mean, right. Were they all meant to be the same thing, or were they meant to be different beings, but Snoke was the one that came to fruition?
No, I mean, that's totally a good point, Ronaldo. I mean, and I think a lot of people were really wondering if that was actually Snoke. The other thing is, did you catch the reference of carbonite blindness?
Yes. Yes. I thought, see, and again,
like
these guys.
I still can't see out of my left eye.
Yes.
Like, and I was like, all right.
I mean, that's one of the things that I thought was just done so brilliantly is the fact that they bring in these really subtle things. But what I like about it is that they don't beat you over the head with fan service like what was done in the sequel trilogy.
Right. It's kind of just dropped and moved on. And like, if you really didn't, like a lot of times you might not even catch it if you really weren't paying attention.
Right. And the problem is, and we'll get more into this with episode 5 because this comment that I'm about to make really pertains more to the 5th episode than it does to this. But you can really say this about the last 2, 3 and 4, where JJ thought more like a commercial filmmaker, like, I've got to make this to where it'll appeal to a wide audience so it makes $1 billion. He was thinking, he played it safe because this all is what The Rise of Skywalker should have been. Whereas Favreau and Filoni are giving it what the story needs, and they're bringing in all this stuff because they don't have to explain all this stuff. I mean, they're bringing in all these things from the canon, whether it be in the books or the comics, or little Easter eggy things from the Clone Wars or things like that. It's like they're bringing all this stuff in, and they're not. There's characters that they're bringing in where the casual fan's not going to know who these people are. But again, they don't have to. Yeah. They'll learn.
Yep.
We were all casual fans once. I mean, this is what kills me about that argument that Kathleen Kennedy keeps making. It's like, look, when we all saw A New Hope, especially once he called it A New Hope and it was episode 4, so now we know we're being dropped in the middle of some story. And they're just casually throwing things out like the Imperial Senate and, Grand Moff this. And, I mean, we don't know what any of this stuff is. There was no explanation. Like, there was no little program booklet we got at the theater to explain to us the history and all that. You know what we got? We got an opening crawl. And then we were expected to put our little big boy pants on and just watch the movie and get the story.
Right.
But now everybody wants, like, well, you can't bring this in because the casual fan, you know what? Screw the casual fan. That'll get me views. But no, seriously, because if you think about it, Star Wars is in a very unique place right now because, and we've talked about this a million times, when it was new, it was basically made for that generation. As subsequent generations started adopting it and as they started to make new Star Wars content, well, now you have a problem because you have different levels of fandom. You have people who came into it and are basically adhering to, like, it's almost like they're a certain trilogy or whatever is precious to them. And so now it's almost like, it was like one of those things that I once said that, okay, they should make a Star Wars movie for the fans. And the question becomes, well, which ones?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, in my mind, I kind of look at things, to your point, like almost like music. Like, okay, there's different generations of people who came to know Michael Jackson. Like, there's people, like there's kids now who were born in like 2005 or something like that, who've now heard and seen Michael Jackson, whether it's on YouTube or, heard his music on the radio. But then there's people like me who I actually grew up during an era when he was still releasing brand new music, and then there's people like you who actually were around when he actually like released Thriller. Like, you remember when Thriller was actually released.
Off the wall, even.
Off the wall. Yeah, exactly. So it's like, okay, well, I'm thinking, and I often liken it to, I was like, yeah, like I'm thinking like Bad is Michael Jackson's first album. And it's like, no, let's go back to Thriller. Let's go back to Off the Wall. Then he's Jackson 5. Like, I'm like, oh, okay. He did all this other songs too. So I'm like, oh, okay. That was Michael too back then. Yep. That was Michael Jackson. Wow. So I just went back and just looked at it. So now in this day and age, when you have Disney Plus, that puts all the content in a nice little spot for you. You don't really have to go searching for it much. Now, granted, some of the other stuff like the books or the
holiday special.
God.
Hey, you can watch our version of it. Remember, there's going to be a link in the comment section.
But yeah, I mean, you have all these ways now of like going back and retrieving this information very quickly, might I add, as opposed to, this taking place, years ago. So, for the casual fan, like, and these new kids, if you really want to know, like, okay, where did this happen and who's this person?
No, you bring up an astounding point because they actually have one source now that they can get this stuff. It's not as if you're lost on something. You can't. I mean, I guess you do have to subscribe to Disney Plus. But the point is, once you subscribe to that, and by the way, you do get all the Marvel content and all the Disney films and all that. But yeah, you can go, wow, what's this reference from? Oh, it's from the Clone Wars. Well, what's that? Well, okay, now I can go and watch the entire
the whole series. Yeah.
But I think what I'm talking about, though, comes into yes, you can do it, but it's like, what level of fandom are you where you're going to care? And this is where it goes into my point. It's like, look, if you're that casual and you don't really care, then don't worry about it.
Right.
It's not like these characters, like, if you didn't know who Bo-Katan was, you would be totally fine with how she was introduced in The Mandalorian. You'd be pretty much up to speed.
Yeah.
Yeah, it won't be as rich and as cool and all that other stuff, but it's not like you're going to be lost. You know, it's not like when I would always try to watch Dune. Now, there's a movie for you that's, I don't know what the new one, you know, the trailer for the new one looks cool, but you talk about a story where you get lost, like, as soon as the credits come up.
Right. I'm laughing at Ronaldo's comment.
I know, I see it.
Ronaldo says, I like how they delved into Cara Dune and how she felt after the destruction of Alderaan. I just hope they don't say she's Padme's niece or something like that.
Well, and let's get into that a little bit, because that was something else that I wanted to bring up too, was the fact that they made this big connection to Alderaan. That now you found out that Cara was from Alderaan.
Well, we knew that.
Yeah, I know we knew it, but it was like, I know they brought that up in the first season, but I think that this is the first time that it was connected more to the New Republic, and you had a guy trying to recruit her, saying like, hey, you know, we really need you. Like, it was more meaningful.
Yeah, he really was trying to sympathize with her and really try to connect. The
Yeah.
other thing is, I'm like, would you just start carrying medals around in your pocket? I mean, I'm like, what the heck was that? It's like, oh yeah, by the way, here.
The other thing too is,
Like a gold star in school.
and
like.
again, it's been a minute since I've seen this episode, but it was kind of weird that he just knew her whole. He must have been looking her up.
Well, yeah, I mean, because
Obviously she's a marshal, and he wants to see all the backstory. But it just, it's interesting to me that it's kind of like you said, they're like detectives now. It's almost like they're internal affairs kind of thing going.
Yeah.
I mean, even though they're not really part of the New Republic yet, but it's kind of like that Homeland Security. That's really more what it's like. Like, I'm going to get into your business a little bit because you're on my radar now. And it's weird that Cara didn't seem to be too, like, freaked out by that.
Yeah, I mean, I think because she's kind of like, well, what are you going to do at this point? You know, and it's kind
of... Well, maybe, but if you remember from season 1, she was really, like, adamant about laying low.
Yeah, but I think, you know, once she kind of found her, I think that's what happens when you really don't know where you fit and you just kind of, you're initially just running, but once you kind of find your place and you know that you have a team of people who are really behind you, you know, when you got Grief, you got the Mandalorian, you know, kind of like backing you on a lot of different things, you kind of a little bit more comfortable because the thing about her was that she was alone. And that's the thing. So it's like when you're alone, you know, physically, you're going to feel alone emotionally too. But now she has a sense of community. She has a sense of family. She has a sense of belonging now. And it's not like you really can really say anything. I mean, like, I was one of you guys. So what are you guys going to do? You know, so I just chose not to do this anymore. So
yeah, I mean, I guess I could see what you're saying. I mean, it's...
See, now Grief, I couldn't see the cool thing about him is that because of his rap, you know, because that's the other thing. And this is what I love, you know, and I'll say this, like... Well, I'll ask you this question first.
Uh-oh.
So far, since we're not doing Duel of the Fates, so far, who is your favorite character?
Wow, you even say it like it's a Duel of the Fates segment. It's weird.
Who's your favorite character? Like,
oh, I thought you were gonna give me. Like I thought this was really gonna be like Duel, like this versus that.
No. I mean, just saying, like, out of all the characters that we've
Han Solo
in The Mandalorian, who's your favorite character?
It's tough. That's actually tough because I love all these characters.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, I really like the Din Djarin character. He's really a surprise to me because I was that guy that was really bummed when it wasn't going to be a Boba Fett miniseries. and then I found out it's going to be about some Mandalorian that it's like, why? I mean, that's almost like,
Yeah.
if you think back to the Clone Wars when they had this whole story arc about the Mandalorians, it'd be like if they picked one of the guys and said, yeah, we're going to have a series about that guy. Who cares about that guy? It's,
Right.
But what's funny is when you get to know him and you see his growth and you see that he cares about this child and he cares about where he came from and he's trying to make a connection, there's a lot of story there.
Yeah, definitely.
What a shock. You get really good storytellers, they tell good stories.
Mm-hmm.
And the sign of a really good storyteller is when you have to actually sit there and go like, man, who is my favorite character? Because every character that came up, I'm like, I'd be tempted to say the Mandalorian,
Okay.
but I love the Grief Karga character. I love the Cara Dune character. And I was the guy that was like, oh, Gina Carano, really? Really? You're going to bring her into this? You're going to,
Yeah.
I fell in love with her character.
Yeah, Jason says my favorite character is Mando. My favorite side character is Grief Karga. Moff Gideon is also very cool.
Yeah, I mean, and that's it. And then, of course, Ronaldo, going back to the earlier point about Alderaan, says, when the pilot said, did you lose someone on Alderaan? I said, how about the whole planet?
I know, right?
Yeah, I know.
That's why what she said, everybody. I was like,
yeah, it was just kind of like, dude, really? I mean, that's just...
Yeah.
I mean, that's just really insensitive, man.
Stupid.
Oh, did you lose somebody on Alderaan? We kind of lost Alderaan.
Yeah, how about Alderaan?
Like the whole planet. Yeah. We lost the planet.
And where have you been?
I mean, granted, I guess if people could have been off-world or something.
But
if you're going to lose anybody, it's going to be on Alderaan.
Yep. Now, my favorite character out of all of this so far is Gideon. Like, Moff Gideon, to me, is like the coolest, like probably like the coolest bad guy that's not a force wielder to me. Just because I just love the way he just kind of approaches things. And especially like the little mind control. Well, not the, I
don't know, man. We don't necessarily know yet that he's not a force wielder.
We don't know yet, but I'm just saying thus far. At this point, yes, we don't know, but I'm just going to say Moff Gideon because...
Yeah, he's another one.
Like when he popped up and he's actually outside the cantina and then he starts running down their names and everything about them. And they're just like, holy crap. Like he kind of does that as like kind of a psychological warfare to kind of like, well, wait a minute. Well, you really know who you're with. And
that's the thing. This is what I love. This is what I love about the way that these characters are being written now. Even though... Because... It's really cool that they can keep coming up with these different characters and make them different.
Yeah.
Because the temptation would be, do you make them like Tarkin? Do you make them like Thrawn? Do you make them like Vader-ish or Palpatine? Do you make them, like, even...
He's kind of, he gives me like a mob boss vibe. That's the thing
I
like
well,
about
that's
him.
it. It's almost like he'd fit right at home with the Hutts and all those guys.
Mm-hmm.
And don't forget, Lucas is going to do that whole underworld type of thing.
13,
yeah, and Filoni was going to be a part of that, no doubt. So,
yeah,
maybe there was some character in there that he was somewhat influenced by. But it's refreshing, even in the books. In A New Dawn, man, I wish I can remember. Look up the main villain in A New Dawn.
Jason probably already knows.
Yeah, Jason probably totally knows. But I keep forgetting his name. But he was kind of like half. He kind of had a Grievous vibe in a way, but he was really threatening. And he was unlike anybody that they had really introduced before. So I give it to them that they can keep introducing these really cool characters. And if you really look at the ensemble cast of The Mandalorian, right? It's just, everybody's really cool. Even Quill.
Oh yeah,
which everybody forgot about him after season 2 starts.
I knew Jason would know before I even got to it. Count Vidian,
that's it. Yes, Count Vidian. That guy, if you really look that guy up, he's a really, really cool villain. Ronaldo says, my favorite character is Din Djarin. I like his evolution since the first season. It amazes me how much I care about him, even though I can't see his face.
Yeah,
yes,
exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. It's like, here's a guy that's able to emote. And don't forget, in like the first season, it wasn't even Pedro Pascal in the suit half the time.
Right.
But the idea that they could actually give you a character that emotes and you really care, even though he's this faceless guy. I mean, that's ultimately, I would have to say that's probably it, because I'm thinking to myself, who would I not want to see an episode without?
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I would come to Din, because
Well, he's only the star of the show.
Yeah, but I mean, you could
No,
go off on a side story with any of these, and that's the point. It's one of the things that we always said, even about Frasier. We got to go back to Frasier. Is you could take any of the characters in Frasier, even the most minute side character, and you can make an entire series out of them. That's the sign that you have a good ensemble cast and a good batch of well-written characters. And I can honestly say that if a Grief Karga comic came out, I'd be all over it.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't, I mean, if they gave him his own series, it would be a little strange, but I'd watch it because I like the character. I like Cara Dune. I think that they could do a lot with her.
Sure.
And then, of course, now you're bringing Bo-Katan into it. We know Ahsoka's coming.
Mm-hmm.
You know, who knows who else they're going to bring in. So, I mean, it's one of those things that I just think that you really have a cast. And that was something I was skeptical about, by the way, when this whole thing first came on. I was like, I don't know, man. You know, it looks like this series is going to be cool, and I think that the tone of the series is going to be done really well, but I was really shocked. Like, I knew I would be invested somewhat, but I'm really surprised by how much I'm invested in all the characters of this show.
Yeah, definitely. I would love to honestly see more with Gideon.
Well, I think we will. I
think next episode we're really going to start to see.
We're going to start to probably see more, maybe the next 2 or 3, and then it's tough to say whether or not they're going to end his storyline along with the rest of the stuff, because it seems like they could, but then
I don't think so.
It's like I do thoroughly believe that they're going to end the child part of it. They're going to end the child part of it by then. But that does not necessarily mean they have to end anybody else's.
Right.
Because now you can go in, like you said, we can bring Sabine in on season 3, and now you can have this whole who's ruling Mandalore. Is it going to be Bo-Katan? Is it going to be Sabine? Is it going to be Gideon? Because don't forget, Maul ruled it for a while.
Right.
And he had the Darksaber for a while. Because that's another thing they got to bring up. Okay, Gideon has it. How did he get it? Who did he get it from?
Right.
You know, so, I mean, there's just a lot of unanswered questions there. And I think that these are things that you really have to, you know, you just have to.
Yeah, one of the big things I loved about this particular episode of The Siege was that, you know, we start to see the plan from the remnants of the Empire. So, like, okay, we already kind of knew they were, you know, from season 1, they wanted this asset and they wanted to do experiments on them. We kind of figured that they were trying to use the blood or something like that because of the Force or whatnot. So then now, you know, we're seeing at the end of this episode, at the crux of the episode, you know, that, okay, this, the doctor pretty much comes up and it's like, hey, Moff Gideon, blah, 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 here's where we are. One, the guy kind of reminds me totally of Hugo Strange from
He does.
Gotham. But outside of that, though, you know, it's like, okay, well, what are they planning? And, you know, now you see like what we thought to be a Snoke, which was a Snoke of genius to put that in there.
Oh.
But then,
now where there's Snoke, there's fire.
Oh, here we go. The rabbit hole.
Yeah, it's like leave in the comment section your best Snoke pun.
Yes. Oh, we should do. You know what? Do that.
Yeah, do that. Leave your best Snoke pun in the comment section.
Jason Ronaldo, let's go. But then the other thing too is just that, you know, at the very end, you know, okay, you know, those guys were working on the Razor Crest, you know, planted the tracking beacon on the thing, and you know that one lady finally got her transmission. It's like, yep, all right, Snoke. I mean, not Snoke. All right, Gideon. You know, we planted the beacon. You know, it's working. So okay, can we confirm that they still have the asset? Yep, we still can confirm that they have the asset. All right, we'll be ready. And then you see all these like trooper looking things, and they don't look like
No,
human.
they look like these like super battle.
They're like droids.
They
but
look
they're
like Death Troopers, but they look like the battle droid version of a Death Trooper. Jason says, Snoke, I refuse to make a Snoke pun. And then Ronaldo says, by the way, Dr. Pershing said there was a volunteer. Do you think it's Moff Gideon or someone else?
I think it's someone else because they was talking to Gideon. So I think the volunteer was probably whoever or whatever Snoke was.
Yeah, I mean, unless they really go out on a limb and it's Palpatine. But they wouldn't. If it was Palpatine, Gideon wouldn't even be.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question because they'd have to get some Force guy. And, by volunteer, do they mean voluntold? I mean, this is the Empire we're talking about. Volunteer means something a little bit different in the Empire. But, yeah, no, you're right. The last, what was it, probably like 5-10 minutes at the most? Mm-hmm. That's the part where it's like, ooh, we're full on back into the story mode now.
And they're really good at giving you they're really good at giving you a good cliffhanger. Like, okay, what's the next episode?
Yeah, you know what I hate about that, by the way? That brings up a really good point. I'm glad you said that because it irritates me that they don't say like next on The Mandalorian.
Oh yeah, I'm glad. Yeah, we don't get like that a preview of next week. Yeah,
I want one.
No, I'm saying I hate that they don't do that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because I mean, the thing about it is they'll end like in such a spectacular way, and you're like, I gotta know what. But in a way, though, it does make it kind of cool because when you put it on that day, like when Friday comes around, no matter when you have a chance to watch it, you really have no idea what you're getting. Like another thing that I really loved about this too, Dr. Pershing, right?
Yep.
I love the fact that, they were analyzing his message and they're like, no, it was done 3 days ago. And it's like, again, there's that sense of dread that, ooh, it's almost like you're finding out at this, even though you already know Gideon's alive.
But yeah, for them.
But for them, and you feel that. And they're doing such a great job at making you feel that danger and that ominousness and, all these really great things about it. And yeah, they're really now advancing the lore a little bit.
Yeah, Ronaldo says, imagine if the volunteer for that Snoke clone was Mace Windu.
Yeah, well, there have been, and Daryl and I were talking about this a little bit off camera today, but
if they retrieved his body, I guess maybe.
Well, and we'll see. But again, there has been let me just say this is a rumor that's been gaining a lot of traction, where people seem to think for some odd reason that Mace Windu is going to pop up in this series. Now, I will say that if he is going to pop up, this would be the series because, as we know, there's been a speculation that he did not die because, after all, his hands were chopped and he was thrown out, the window. But we all know that you can use the Force to slow your descent. There are ways he could have survived. But I've always said, and I think you and I addressed this once, that if he were going to come back out, he would have been coming out during the original trilogy. Because he's powerful enough. So he could have gone and...
Plus, I don't think he could beat Snoke anyway because he's not that tall.
Well, not that he's not... No. This isn't that he's Snoke. This is that he's going to come back. Like, he's been laying low. Maybe he's dressed up as a Mandalorian. Maybe he's just laying low. And then he's going to come back out.
Okay. Ronaldo says, my favorite Snoop Dogg song is Snoke Weed every day.
Oh, yeah? Well, my favorite Motley Crue song is Snoking in the Boys' Room. It's not, but it works with the thing. I know.
Oh, man.
People are going to unsubscribe in a minute. But, I mean, it would make sense. But, again, I think that they have to tread very carefully because you don't want to do something where the fan base is going to go, oh, come on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So far, I think they've been doing a really good job because the fact that you bring up these little Snoke things in the lab, well, that makes sense because we know that in 20 or 30 years, I mean, even from the Rise of Kylo Ren comics, we know that Snoke was a thing.
Right.
Even before he was in the First Order, people knew who he was. So this is 6 years after Return of the Jedi, which means there could be like a 14-year period between maybe around the time we see Snoke versus at this time period. So it's, I mean, who knows? And then Ronaldo says, by the way, I was kidding. The Mace Windu is Snoke theory. Makes no sense to me. And then Jason's got a couple of comments. He was hit by Palpy's lightning, which was so powerful that he could barely hold back Sidious's lightning with a lightsaber. Kenobi blocked Dooku's lightning easily and one-handed. Dooku killed Ventress in seconds. Windu should be dead. Yeah, true. But the thing is that he was still screaming when he went out the window, though. So he was alive. That's the problem. Mm-hmm. He was not dead when he went out the window. He could have died maybe shortly after. He could have gotten plowed into by a speeder.
Or yeah, maybe it just took a while, like a few seconds for it to finally just shut his body down.
Point is, we don't know.
Yeah, we don't know.
And because we don't know, the writers can go in any direction.
True.
Don't forget, Windu was extremely powerful. Mm-hmm. Extremely powerful. And he also had a little bit of dark side power himself.
That's true.
So we really don't know. It's all...
Hey, if they could bring back Maul and he was lopped in half.
Yeah, and that's the other thing I got to look at, too. It's like, guys, they brought back Darth Maul. Darth Maul was cut in half and he fell down a shaft. Let's be real. If they could do that, anything's on the table.
Sounds like a kid's nursery rhyme.
It's...
It's cut in half, fell down the shaft. But
exactly.
Yeah, so let me ask you guys, let me ask you this question. So I'm going to volley it back to you. What would you rate this episode?
I'm going to probably like an 8.5.
Dang, that's exactly what I was going to say.
Well, I want to be careful what I give 10s to.
Yeah, true.
And I don't want to be that guy that's always saying, well, I don't give 10s to anything because there's always improvement.
Oh, yeah.
There are those people.
True.
But, in the grand scheme of things, here's the problem with rating the episode. And I'm just going to put this out there now. Pretty much, what I give the episode today may not be what I give the episode once I see the entire series.
True. Jason says, Maul survived, and I'm glad he did. If Windu becomes an awesome character, I will accept it. But unless they have a super cool story for him, they should keep him dead.
Oh, absolutely. And I'll go even one further. I was really surprised at how easily and how wonderfully I accepted Maul coming back. Because at first I thought it was cheap, but the story was so good I didn't care. Mm-hmm. And that's the key. And again, I think that we can all agree that the key is a good story. You give me a good story.
The only problem is that like now when we start having, and as much as I love Mace Windu and I would have loved, honestly, I wish he would have never died to begin with. But you kind of have to when you look at the totality of the story. But then when you look at it from the rest of the standpoint, it's like, all right, if you bring him back now, it's like, okay, one, what the heck were you like everybody else? And then two, it's kind of like, what are you really going to do with him? Because he's not in the sequel trilogy. So he's
definitely alive.
Who? Mace Windu?
Yeah.
Oh, boy, you about to say something crazy. I can see it in your face. I'm looking dead at you. I know you're about to say something crazy. What is it, Aaron?
Well, you know me really well. That's
I do.
The problem. You can see that look, that little twinkle in my eye, like, ooh, I just thought of something really hilarious, but it's true. Think about this.
Well, he lives in all of us.
No, it's not that cheesy. Besides, we already knew that. I'd say there's a little Mace in all of us, but that's kind of nasty.
Ew.
No, think about it. Maul falls down a shaft, survives. Palpatine falls down a shaft, survives. Now, Windu didn't fall down a shaft, but he fell. Mm-hmm. If you fall, you get to come back. So, Jason says, I would rate this episode 9 out of 10. Windu's story is major part of Anakin's fall. Yeah, but then again, so is Palpatine dying too. If you think about it, Palpatine dying it's like when they brought him back, that sort of, and again, I don't necessarily subscribe to the fact that it completely undoes the redemption and all this other stuff. But I do understand people's point, though, that it does lessen it. Then he goes on to say, Maul's death was a waste. Windu's story is a major part of Anakin's fall. Yeah, and again, that's one of those things that I always talk about, too, is that just like you have to be able to tell a good story, if you're going to bring somebody back, it has to serve the story better than what originally served by killing them off.
Definitely.
So in other words, it's kind of like if killing them off served the story, bringing them back has to somehow serve the story in a better way than keeping them dead. But then again, this is all fantasy anyway, so I mean, who are we to say? But so you're saying 8.5.
Yep.
Jason says 9. Ronaldo, I don't think we got yours. And if anybody else wants to chat in there too, and what you guys would rate it, let us know. But other than that, how would you guys rate it? How did you guys feel that this stacked up against the previous episodes? And do you like the direction The Mandalorian is going? Leave that in the comments section. Ronaldo says, you think those dark troopers are droids or armors? I think they're actually like battle droid versions of death troopers. That's what they look like to me.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, I kind of take that.
Jason says, I did not like that Palpatine came back to life the same way I wouldn't like if Windu came back to life. Like I said, I agree. I mean, it does cheapen the story a little bit. In the original version of Episode 9, Palpatine did not come back. And as much as I enjoyed him coming back, I think it would have been a better story if he hadn't. But I also could see ways that they could have brought him back better than what they did. Then Ronaldo says, I give this one a 9.5 out of 10. Oh, okay. It's my favorite episode. Really? You seen episode 5? Okay. If you haven't, get ready because we're gonna be spoiling that in a few minutes. Jason says Chapter 8 and Chapter 13 were slightly better than 12, but 12 and 13 are very close. Yeah, I would agree with that only because I think that you have to really look at the way that this whole thing is being laid out. I think that you're going to find that this really is one big movie.
Yeah.
And I think the problem is because we're being fed this one chapter at a time, I think the problem with it is that, I don't know, it's almost like, and that's why I say that my rating can change because on one hand, I'm going to give it like an 8.5 today. I might see chapter, I don't even know what we're going to be on at that point, 18?
Mm-hmm.
Or something?
Talking about at the very end?
Yeah. Or 15 or, I can't really do math apparently. But either way, it's like, okay, once I see it in its totality, because I would agree too, Chapter 8 was incredible. And that whole revelation where, Gideon pops out with the Darksaber, I mean, who expected that?
Right.
I mean, first of all, I never thought in a million years we would ever see the Darksaber in live action.
Definitely. No, I agree. I mean, that's one of the things that's kind of like everything is relative, like as far as what you have. So, yeah, I think that a lot of these episodes are getting better. I think we're actually getting more to the story, to the point.
Yeah, and I think by nature of that, I think that's why we're going to naturally rate these things higher.
Yeah, I mean, because of course, the season 1 was just the introduction. We're getting to know these characters. You're introducing everything. You kind of setting up the world, and then now, like in season 2, now we're really getting into the actual plot of it all. And I think this might even carry on to even season 3, just depending on how this one ends. I could see this honestly going at least into season 3.
It could.
At least halfway into it.
It could. I mean, as we've been talking about this and as we realize there's only 3 more episodes left,
mm-hmm.
There is a possibility because the worst thing they could do is rush everything. Oh yeah, Dwight Terrence.
Yes, Dwight. 8.5, just a half point above 3.
But then he says,
My bad. I just came out. I thought we were talking about episode 5. Trust me, bro. We're on our way.
"We're getting there. We're right there. We're right at the edge. We're right at the edge." And in fact, you ready to go there?
Hey, man, let's go. Dwight
right.
pushed us over the edge.
Yep. All right. So now we are on to season 2, episode 5. This has been the mother lode of them all.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. So this, and I mean, right out the gate,
13.
chapter 13. And again, this is a point because it did come out today. I feel compelled once again, even though this should come as a surprise to exactly no one that's been watching for more than 10 minutes.
All right.
It's going to be very spoiler heavy. You're not going to be happy if you didn't see this episode and you don't want spoilers. I would direct you, in the meantime, to go to the comments section and check out our hilarious reaction video to the Star Wars Holiday Special, where we actually watch it in its entirety and you see it. It's not one of those things where, oh, time it, and all this other stuff. Somehow we actually got away with it. We show it. We show it in a window, and then there's us four on the side of it, and we're just commenting on it the whole time. It's hilarious. So be sure to check that out after we're done with this. And if you didn't see episode 5 or chapter 13, go head over there now and then watch Mandalorian and then come back to this. Okay. Right out the gate.
Yes.
Right out the gate, we see a bunch of people, and then Ahsoka comes out.
Man.
Blazing with the white lightsabers.
Yes, I'm glad they kept the one.
They did.
They kept the white, because I heard she was going to have the blue ones. Because remember they kept talking about they were going, but then the toys actually had it as the white sabers.
Well, and the thing is, because it was Anakin that rebuilt them as blue, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the big controversy with this was the Ahsoka novel, which takes place after the events of Clone Wars Season 7. Well, maybe not all of it, but most of it. She has the white lightsabers again.
Yeah, because in Rebels, she has the white ones.
Right. So I don't really understand why anybody would have been... Because I know that this was a topic of conversation, but why was this a thing? She had the white ones in Rebels.
Right.
This takes place after Rebels.
Mm-hmm.
Ergo...
Yeah, she should, but, and especially with Filoni and, being at the helm of that too, why wouldn't she, But anywho, we see Ahsoka Tano come out and she's like laying waste to she's like stalking these things like Michael Myers. Like whatever these little soldier guys just have sand people looking, soldiers.
Yeah, does anybody, Jason, this is really directed to you, but I feel compelled to say, does anybody... I'm so glad we got one of the hardcores on here that's like a little encyclopedia. What were those creatures called that she was fighting in the beginning? He's just going to Google it like we do. But we'll see. We'll see. It depends on how fast the answer comes. And we have to remember this is probably on a slight delay depending on where you're watching it. But yeah, let us know in the chat what those creatures were called.
Well, in the Wikipedia, they're called mercenaries. That's how they...
That's it?
Yep. They just call mercenaries. Which
really? They didn't identify and give like an entire backstory?
Hey, that's what they
you know what? They'll do that when the action figures come out.
Right. Well, they're on the planet Corvus. So we initially get that.
There's something special about that planet too.
That's where Ahsoka is. I know, I'm just teasing. No,
okay. See, at least when you were calling into the show, I could just hang up on you. Now I actually have to listen to this stuff. Like I can mute you, but I still see you.
Exactly.
You could still throw stuff at me. So
yes, force throw them actually.
We just end up getting into a fight. I always thought it would be so funny to see, like if a host and a co-host were doing a show, and then all of a sudden they just got into this like wicked fight, but on camera.
Well, even more hilarious, we just pulled out lightsabers and just started dueling.
Yeah, but you know how cheesy that would be?
Yeah, it would be like the going viral.
Dude, yeah, I mean, for all the wrong reasons. It'd be that Star Wars kid all over again.
Well, yeah, man,
we'd get views, though.
Yeah. But yeah, in this episode, yeah, I think it was really dope. I think I love, like you said, the imagery of it, like the whole smoky vibe.
Yeah, so now this is going back to what I was talking about these last 3 episodes, episode 3, 4, and 5. It kind of has this smoky,
Ominous,
gloomy, Sleepy Hollow kind of thing going. And I got to say, like, that little village that they were in, I'd live there.
I don't know, man. It's kind of...
I loved it, man.
Now, on the inner walls, yes.
Well, I mean, yeah, with the little... the canal thing or whatever.
Koi pond.
Yeah, whatever. But I mean, it had a really cozy vibe to it. I mean, I kind of like the whole vibe to that. And the weather. I mean, I love it when the weather's like that. When it's kind of gray. Like everybody else gets depressed. That's like my favorite stuff. Is that really gray, gloomy, Halloween looking, Sleepy Hollow kind of thing. I'm weird. I know. I'm not denying it. I'm just saying. So, I mean, I do love the look. And this episode, as you're pointing out, continues that.
Yeah, definitely. So, and
that sepia tone woods that they were in.
Yeah, and Ahsoka used it to her advantage, definitely. Along with the Force, and just watching her use some Force tricks too. That was still kind of funny how she did the fake throw thing, and then she cut the tree in half and then shot the little log out. So I thought that was cool. I would just once again we've seen stills or kind of images, but to actually see her as Ahsoka Tano.
Yeah, because to my knowledge, all those stills were mock-ups. They
were mock-ups, but
they weren't like
official.
Actual production stills.
Correct. So to actually see her once again, it translated well.
Very much so.
As far as her look, I mean, the garb all the way down to the little bead she had, I mean, it was just like perfect, which is why you understood why Dave Filoni wanted to direct this episode, because Ahsoka Tano is his baby. But then, so once Din Djarin, eventually shows up in the Razor Crest, he's, basically taking him in to the city, into the city walls. Of course, they're asking like who he is, and he's like, "Oh, you're a hunter? Yep, coming here to chill out." So he goes in there, he starts trying to inquire of the vendors about, Ahsoka, but then apparently they're all under some like hush order. And then he's summoned by the magistrate, who is this lady, and she kind of brings him in behind the inner walls, where she kind of has this conversation with
him. Jason has a little bit of a tidbit about that. He said, Morgan Elsbeth is the magistrate, and Caladan is the name of the city. That is all I could find out in a short amount of time. Well, at least you're on the case. That's good. You know what? While we're at it, let's just take some of these chats. Jason also says, what did you think about Ahsoka's fighting choreography? We'll get there. Right now, we got to do the choreography, the synopsis.
Yeah.
We got to tell everybody what it was about. Ronaldo says, Rosario Dawson looks perfect as Ahsoka. The lightsabers look great in live action. I agree. Great. I was really pleasantly surprised by that.
Yep.
Then he also says, maybe I'm the only one who made this comparison, but the beginning of the episode reminded me of the beginning of Rise of Skywalker. I did not actually think about it, but it's true. It very much mirrors that beginning Kylo Ren scene when he's going through that weird forest and,
mowing down all those mercenaries or whatever the heck
whatever they were.
People.
Yeah. So, I mean, absolutely. I totally agree, man. I mean...
Yeah, that's a good point.
All right. Let's get through this so we can actually talk about the episode.
Yep. So, essentially, he goes in, meets with her. She says, hey, you're a Mandalorian. You're the ancient enemy of the Jedi. I got a Jedi I want you to kill. If you kill this Jedi, I'll give you this nice, spear that's made out of a Beskar steel.
Okay, I got to stop right here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, in the first season, we're led to believe that this is like some rare... Now, in this season, everything is made out of Beskar. I mean, everybody seems to have it somewhere.
Well, the Imperials did confiscate it, and
yeah,
she's
but
a part
I mean,
of that
it just
regime.
seemed like everybody, like, oh, I got a couple of pieces of Beskar. You can have this or whatever. It's almost like another form of currency. It's like Disney dollars. But I just think it's really funny because, especially, and I'm not even talking about the later parts of season 1. I mean, more like the earlier parts.
Right.
Everybody's just going on about, oh, it's Beskar. It's rare. Nobody can, to even find like a little bit of it is just enormously, like, astronomical odds and all this stuff. And now, by the time we get into season 2, it's like, it's at every intergalactic drugstore or something. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I get it. Well, I mean,
but okay, Beskar spear.
Yep, we got the Beskar spear. So he's like, okay, he's kind of, using the situation to his advantage. He's like, all right, yeah, sure. I'm looking for her anyway. So perfect. So, they kind of send him out there and he's, searching for her and she finds him and they get into this little mini battle for a second. And, that's when a lot of people forget that Beskar can actually repel lightsaber
I was going to say, that was one of the things that I was really glad about, because that's somewhat of those things that they've sort of brushed upon in lore, but I don't think it actually reached the realm of common knowledge. And I was hoping that they would show a scene to where they actually show how Beskar can deflect lightsaber, strikes. So I was really happy to see that.
Yeah, definitely. So after that, they kind of get in this little quarrel. Of course, he brings out the flamethrower. And then he kind of yells the name Bo-Katan out to Ahsoka after he mentions her name. And so then she's kind of stops. And he's like, yeah, she sent me to find you. And then she's like, well, I hope it's about this. And she looks towards the child.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure that got her attention.
Yeah, I
instantly.
thought that was hilarious.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, and that's the other thing too, I was wondering how they were going to deal with this.
Yeah, I didn't know if she was going to be able to feel him through the force or if she was just going to see him.
Well, and that was it. It was kind of like we knew that she was going to pop up in one of the episodes, but we didn't know, exactly how. Now, Jason is wondering, is that the first time that we see that in canon? And he's talking about the Beskar lightsaber duel. Yeah, it's the first time we ever see it in canon. Yes,
but you can read it in canon though.
Yeah, it's been mentioned, but again, you have to really be dialed in to. And I think it was even mentioned in the first season of The Mandalorian when they first started talking about. I'd have to go back and look, but I remember there was something in The Mandalorian that triggered my memory on that. But it was mentioned, but it's never been, it's like I said, it's not one of those things that a lot of people would really know. And their introduction to that fact actually was probably this episode. But yeah, I was wondering the same thing about the child too. It's like, how are they going to, because as soon as she sees him.
Yeah.
It becomes,
instant, wait a minute.
Instant. Which of course is interesting because now we finally know his name.
Yep. So
it was really tough. And Ronaldo, you actually made a comment earlier where you mentioned his name in the chat, but we purposely didn't put it in there because we were only on episode 3. And in episode 3, we didn't know his name yet.
Right. But now, we gotten to the point where after their duel, they kind of said Ahsoka sits down with the child and they communicate kind of telepathically with each other. And that's when she brings the child over to Din Djarin and they have a conversation. And then she's like, well, hey, Grogu here is, and then he's like, huh?
Yeah, Grogu. I mean, now what do you think of his name?
Yeah. First thing for me, I thought about Groot.
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought too.
And I was like, is this like I am Groot thing? Because that's totally what it reminded me of.
I mean, because I actually saw this episode twice. I happened to be up pretty much all night last night. I don't think I went to bed till 6. And it was a little after 4 or whatever. And I'm looking over, I'm like, yeah, Mandalorian's on. Because being that we're in Eastern Standard Time, yeah, it comes out midnight Pacific time. But for us, it's 3 a.m. I'm like, you know what? I don't have to work tomorrow. I'm going to watch it now. And then I started thinking about it okay, I wasn't exactly the most awake when I saw it, although I was surprisingly awake. So I decided to watch it again. And Grogu, I mean, I like it more now than I did when I first heard it.
Okay.
But I mean, I don't really have a problem with it.
No, it doesn't bother me.
Honestly, I hate the name Yaddle more than I hate Yaddle.
I thought the name was going to actually start with a Y. I thought it was a thing for those, everybody's name starts with a Y.
Yeah. Well, and Jason actually just makes that point. He says, I was surprised there was no Y in the name.
Yep. because I thought it was gonna be like Yoguru or something like
Okay,
that.
this is turning into like Wheel of Fortune now. But I mean, no, it's true. It is interesting in the sense of that we've only seen 2 other examples of the species. Both of them have a Y name.
Right.
So you would think.
Yeah. Now, as we're discovering, and this is the cool thing, is we actually get to discover a lot about Grogu now. Now we know his name, and then now we learn that he was actually a Padawan in the Jedi Temple on Coruscant, and during the Clone Wars. And what happened was that once the Empire took over, they actually hid him, and they told him pretty much like, "Hey, don't showcase your powers,"
Yeah, it actually becomes very Jedi Fallen Order, as a lot of these things are. Which, by the way, if you are a PS4 or
now PS5,
now PS5, but if you they got a good Black Friday deal going now. It's like it's like I'm dropping a commercial in here, but it's like $24. I've been tempted to get it, even though I've been obsessed with the new Call of Duty game. So I don't know when I would have time to play it, but it's like I kind of want to get it at that price because it's got a lot of canon in it. And it really also reminds me of Kanan's story in A New Dawn, where it pretty much almost mirrors exactly the Fallen Order thing, where he hides his powers, he just decides to live his life as a normal guy or whatever, and then Hera slowly pulls him into the other thing. But my question is, she said, if you remember, she said somebody hid him or somebody took him out or whatever.
right?
So my question is, who? Because it almost sounded like it wasn't a they, it was a him or a her.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to wonder who that was.
Well, they even said he was a Jedi initiate before the Clone Wars and was trained by many Jedi masters in the ways of the Force. He was taken from the temple, hidden from the Empire for many years, and his memories during those times are filled with darkness and fear. She inquires to Din Djarin the abilities of Grogu and explains to him the nature of the Force as an energy field between all living things. And then
she gives the Obi-Wan explanation, which I actually thought was kind of a nice touch.
I did too. Yeah, I thought that was cool. And of course, she also just says that she's only met like one of his species, and that was, of course, Yoda. So I thought that was just cool, just to kind of
it was cool. It was cool that they name dropped Yoda. I gotta say.
Yeah, and so
Ronaldo ended up making the same. He says, now the big question is, who took him out of the temple?
Right. And so now, and so at least we have a little bit of backstory on Grogu. So
Grogu.
What did I say? Grogu?
Yeah.
Grogu.
I mean, that's another thing. Of all the things you could have named, you had to do something that was like hard to say.
Yeah.
You actually have to think Grogu.
Yeah, Grogu. Yeah. See?
What up, G?
Yep. Hey, kid.
There you go. Baby Yoda.
Exactly.
That's right. The Baby Yoda name will stay.
So
now we can call him Baby Grogu.
So yeah, so that's pretty much like that part. And then of course he's kind of tired, so they decide to wait till the morning to actually do his Force test to kind of see, his abilities. And of course, Ahsoka kind of picks up a rock, tosses at him with the Force, and he takes it, but then she's like, all right, now pass it back, and he doesn't do it. He just kind of drops it. And that's
the funniest line in the world to me. Actually, one of the funniest things in The Mandalorian was when, she said, like, well, he'll listen to you or something. And you were like, well, that would be the first time or something.
Yeah.
I mean, that was just so funny to me. Because he is kind of stubborn.
Well, yeah, because he can't communicate really with him. So it's kind of like he probably thinks he understands to a certain degree.
Well, he was surprised that, first of all, he kept tripping out that when he said his name,
he would turn his
head like he knew. And then, he was all like, oh, he doesn't. She's like, no, he understands, what you're saying to him. Mm-hmm. But it was funny that, they gave him that little knob off of the ship. And
yeah,
he took that with the quickness, too. Yep. He's like, yep.
That's my thing. So, that was really cool. And then, what I thought was really interesting, though, because it's something we've never really heard before or really thought about, but we kind of mentioned it a little bit, that what if he was a little bit dark side guy? And when she said she saw this fear and darkness in him.
Very Anakin-like.
Yeah.
And it was interesting, too, because she also, in a way, is like, yeah, even to the best of us, this
Right.
happened. She was referring to Anakin.
Yep.
And the thing that's funny about it, too, is that, do you remember, I think I showed it to you, where somebody, I don't even remember where it came from, but there's that rendition of a dark side Yoda.
Mm-hmm.
That
was sweet.
I would like to see that in a movie.
Well, they actually even did the dark side version of Yoda in Clone Wars.
That's true.
When he was actually trying to learn, he was fighting himself, basically.
Yeah, that's true.
So I thought that was cool.
That was cool. And, it would be interesting to see what would happen if one of these species turned to the dark side. I don't in a million years think they're going to do that. But still.
Yeah, but here's another thing, too. I noticed that Ahsoka has said, is like, maybe we should just, like, don't train him and let it just pass. Like, basically, like, let him forget about his Force abilities. And it's like, so you can actually do that.
Oh, Luke did it.
Well, Luke consciously did it, though. Like, he consciously cut himself
it's true
off
because
on the Force.
she even said, hey, does he still remember how to use the Force or whatever? And it's like, well, use the magic hands. I would have cracked up if he had said that. When it's like, well, see if you can get him to do it. Okay, use the magic hands. That still, I think, is probably the funniest.
Yeah, that's one of the funniest lines in the whole series.
Because I did not see that coming. And especially from him.
Well, yeah, especially that's what you would call it, because you don't know.
That's what makes it so hilarious, is how this current, let's just call it generation, understands. They don't really understand the Force. They don't really get it. So they just kind of see these things and like, yeah, use the magic hands. That was great.
Dwight says, you don't forget, it just fades. Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like, how does it... I mean, I know it's like one of those things, like if you don't use it, you lose it kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's no different than if you don't...
work out or something like that.
Yeah,
like
or
if you don't forget how to work out, you just...
Or whatever it is, whatever it is that you're trying to do, maybe you just don't... It's sort of like you forget how to do it and you have to practice again. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's happened. There's been a couple of times where I've gone a long time without playing bass. And it's not that I've forgotten, but there's some songs that if I don't play them, I'm like, I don't even remember how this goes now. Mm-hmm. And they're things that we've written, like originals I'm talking about.
Right.
So it does stand to reason that you could do that.
Dwight said, she even said it on the show, let it fade. Yeah, I mean...
Yeah, argue with that one.
One thing I've learned in my life is never argue with Dwight. But he apparently agrees.
Yes, he does.
But yeah, so... yeah, I think that's just one of those, I think this is one of those things where you really kind of see how different people, respond to the Force, you're seeing like Ahsoka from a different, cause you normally, the old Ahsoka would have been like, oh yeah, let's just, look, it's a little Master Yoda, like awesome. Like I get to have a hand in training it. It's sweet. But now she understands like, no, I've seen what this can do. Like I get it now.
Or changes the man kind of thing. You know what
Exactly.
I mean? It's like, but you do bring up another really excellent point though, in that we should address this now, is the difference between Ahsoka from early Clone Wars, later Clone Wars, Rebels, and then now in Mandalorian. Mm-hmm. And there's definitely a conscious decision to somewhat keep the basic parts of her personality, but make her older, wiser, that kind of a thing. Because I remember when we were first really excited about Clone Wars Season 7 coming out, and, they basically were saying, like, okay, Ashley pretty much was used to playing Ahsoka in Rebels, who had matured and was... a lot older, and she was wiser and stuff like that. And she was like, I actually had to really go back and watch some older episodes. I had to try to get back in the mindset of playing a younger version of this character, which isn't just about changing your voice. It's also about...
your demeanor. Like
your demeanor, like how you're carrying yourself, kind of, like the different things you would say and do.
It's like a confidence that you might have in your voice when you're older versus when you're younger.
Yeah, and just kind of like maybe a more... maturity and a solemnness or something. I mean, you definitely see a lot of growth there.
Yeah, the chats are blowing up. So
yeah, I see that. We should probably address that.
Jason says that one line should not discount everything we have seen from Force users before. Luke cut himself on the Force, but when he returned, he was still powerful.
Yeah, but then again, in his defense, he's also the grandson of the Force, so I think you can't necessarily... This is the thing that I caution people in. Don't apply the same rules as you do the Skywalkers to the other Force users.
True.
You can't do that.
Yeah.
You can't look at Anakin. You can't look at Luke and say, well, Anakin and Luke did this.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, Anakin and Luke were actually born of the Force.
Yeah, they're like...
So you can't really... I mean, I get what you're saying.
That's like comparing Michael Jordan to the rest of the guys in the NBA. I'm like, no, you can't do that.
Ronaldo says, I like that during the climax, we have a samurai-style fight, and on the other side, we have a Western shooting.
Yeah, that was cool.
That was cool.
Even had the whole, garden, that whole koi pond and that bridge.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
It was totally like one of those, Karate Kid moments. Yeah.
Samurai films or whatever.
Yep.
I mean, that's a really good point. I really thought that was a cool juxtaposition, and it really gives you that. It's almost, remember the TV series Kung Fu with David Carradine? The whole idea behind that series was to make like a karate-type, samurai-type film, but set in the Old West and give it a Western vibe.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I think, what's happening with this show is that you have, on one hand, this Clint Eastwood style, character, basically, from like the old Sergio Leone films, which I've actually been in the middle of watching. It's hilarious. I've never seen them.
Wow.
So I saw A Fistful of Dollars. I'm in the middle of For a Few Dollars More, and then of course I got to see The Good, Bad, and the Ugly. But I just thought I'd throw that in there. Jason says, also, it is very difficult to stop using the Force completely. Yeah, I agree with that too. I think what Ahsoka meant is that without training, he really wouldn't be all that powerful compared to other Jedi. I think that would depend, though, on his natural, the species' natural Force ability.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one variable that we have to be careful about how we say that, because
Definitely.
I would actually agree with that point for most.
Mm-hmm.
But with that species, I don't know. I think that we still need a few more variables before we do that. Ronaldo says, it was really cool to finally see a fight between a Jedi and a Mandalorian in live action. Totally agree. And it did not disappoint. And then finally, for this round anyway, Jason says, I think you can apply the same rules to Skywalkers as you do the other Jedi, but with more power for the Skywalkers, just like Michael Jordan to other basketball players. Yeah, I can sort of see that. But again, I think that there's certain characteristics, because you got to remember the Force is more a part of them because they were born of the Force. So naturally, the Force isn't going to completely fade away from them, because the Force, it's kind of like part of them. They can close themselves off to it, but it's almost like a dam. It's like the water's still there. You might put a wall there, but it's still there. With the Skywalkers, it's simply lifting the dam and letting the water flow back. With other Jedi, it would be more like a lake drying up.
Yeah, it's with the Skywalkers, I think you just really have to look at it from just and that's why I use the Michael Jordan, analogy. It's almost like a natural. I mean, although he worked hard at his craft, of course, but I mean, it's just like Michael Jordan was able to do things that was almost just like effortless, and that other basketball players were just like, marveling. Even if I put that much time in the gym, I don't think I could ever be that good. And I think there's a thing when you have a natural ability, and then when you train with that just heightens it all, versus, okay, like your ability can only allow you maybe to go so far. And then you can just only work to the maximum of your ability, sure. But that still may not be like, I can't do what Shaq can do. He's...
Right, and then of course, I leave any of the Sith out of that, because their whole path is a little bit different.
Right.
But, yeah, I just think... ultimately, we just have to wait and see. But, I mean, I do agree, though, that in a lot of ways, it's kind of like, it's like anything else. It's muscle memory. Like, for instance, if you're completely out of shape and you get into shape, it's different than if you were already in shape, got out of shape, and then try to get back in shape. Because if you were a former athlete or somebody who worked out a lot and you let yourself get out of shape, once you start working out again, your body's like, oh yeah, this again. Whereas if you were never in shape to begin with and now you're getting in shape, you're teaching your muscles new things. And I think that you can make that comparison too with the Force that I think aligns a little bit more with what Jason's trying to say. Whereas it's like it never really completely goes away. It's sort of like you can let it fade, but it wouldn't necessarily disappear completely.
Right.
And I would agree with that because, again, the Force is in all living things. It binds us. It brings, all that stuff. So it's kind of like, well, it's there, but it just depends on how you tap into it. And it also depends on how you alert other Force users, too, because that was one of the reasons why a lot of these guys didn't use the Force or try not to tap into it because other Force users can sense that.
Right.
And I think that's more what we're talking about. And I think that that's going to be really interesting to see because that's another thing. Besides the, Ahsoka, this is great. I mean, and it was, including the bomb that they drop at the end of this thing. But I think what's more interesting to me is just how much story arc we got into this thing.
Yeah. Now, Ronaldo asked a question earlier about the choreography of the fighting of Ahsoka.
Oh, yeah, he did, didn't he?
Now, I will say that, what I thought was really cool is that they kept it to a lot of what she normally did. Like, I like the way that she held her sabers. It was exactly the way that Ahsoka did. Her stances and everything like that was exactly how
I was blown away. It was literally like watching the animated Ahsoka in live action.
Some of the flips that she would do were exactly like Ahsoka's. I mean, from
when she got harpooned or what? Well, it wasn't a true harpoon, but the cable,
the fiber cord, yeah.
Yeah. And then she just ended up flipping up. And I mean, I thought that was a very Ahsoka-like thing to do. Dwight.
Yeah. Does anyone know why they shortened her, I forgot how you say it. Moptrals. Yeah, there you go. Thank you. When they were supposed to grow with age, or is it just a byproduct of bringing them into live action? Well, yeah, hers are a little bit shorter.
Yes, but
from Rebels.
Yes, but we don't know. Just like, okay, when you're young and you grow up, right, and you reach say adulthood, middle age, but then as you get older, you start to shrink, muscles start to go. How do we know that as you age, once you reach that apex, you start to go down,
start going on a decline?
Maybe they start to shrivel up.
Well, the other thing too, I did notice on those she has some scars too.
Yeah.
Which I'm wondering, did that come from her fight with Vader?
So Jason says, I didn't like the spear fight at the end, but the rest was great. Mando versus Ahsoka was awesome though. Yeah, I mean, I agree, and I'm glad that they didn't dwell on the spear fight too much. I too was a little bit let down by that.
Well, see the spear fight. See the problem with that once again. I mean, that honestly should have been over in a half a second.
Half a second, because and here's my other complaint. This ties into it. I'm gonna let you finish. I'm gonna Kanye you right now. But basically, I had to say this before I forget it. I really thought that one of the biggest weaknesses of the way that they portrayed Ahsoka in this is she didn't use the Force as much as she should have. It's another pet peeve of mine.
But I think she did that intentionally. I mean,
there were times, though, that she really should have used it when, I mean, anybody would use it. They're just doing it because of either practicality or the effects.
Well, I think that she's trying to minimize using it in that type of capacity where, like you said earlier, other Force users,
But they know. She's running around using it sometimes, and she's running around with lightsabers.
Yeah, but it's in a confined space, saying she was, I mean, one, we don't know how long she was at that particular location. And then, her whole purpose is trying to take over that place back and give it back to its rightful owner. So she pretty much knew she was probably going to have to waste everybody in that place anyway. So there's no one really left around to tell. But I think that, I think that that's part of the reason. The issue I have with it, though, is that like one, she went up against Maul and she went up against Vader. Why are you struggling fighting this chick?
Yeah, that's
you know
exactly.
What I mean? that's my biggest thing. Like
she should have been able to mow that chick down in like half a second.
It should have been that Obi-Wan versus Maul fight. That's what it should have been.
That was cool, and it was cool for that reason because where Obi-Wan was at that time, you know, it's kind of like, listen, dude, you're not fighting the little Padawan that you were fighting back then.
Right, exactly.
You know, I mean, I'm pretty much like a full-fledged Jedi master at this point, and you showed him. And yeah, that Maul fight was like 30 seconds or something. And that's, this is something that they always do that I really hate. They always have to, they did the same thing in a way in season 1 with Mando, is the fact that they made him unnecessarily underpowered so that way they can give him new challenges every week.
Let's see.
Be Ronaldo with this episode. This episode made me wonder, at what point did the Jedi give up the idea of not having attachments? Because apparently Ahsoka still follows that rule. I don't know if she's necessarily following the rule or if it's kind of like she's in hiding and it's kind of like, you know, you don't want a whole lot of stuff.
No, I mean, I know what Ronaldo's saying, and I agree. Because, you know, she was like, well, he's too attached to you. That's what she kept saying. He was like, you're too, you know, he views you as a father figure. He's too attached to you. And he was like, well, so, you know, he's like, well, that's going to fuel his fear. You know what I'm saying? Like if something were to happen to you or he's worried about you, that's going to fuel his fear because he's already experienced loss and darkness and things of that nature. He's already been left alone before. So that's what's going to kind of pretty much hinder him from really probably becoming who he really should be, or it could lead him to the dark side.
Yep. Jason says, I don't think they did give up their ideas about attachments.
Yeah, especially by the time Ahsoka left. You know, remember, she left the order, so at the time, she still is under the impression that they still follow that same rule.
Right. Yeah, and that makes sense. Jason goes on to say, it should have been over in half a second, and the spear was wielded like a staff. Yeah, but, I mean, that's what you got.
I mean, what else you
Yeah, what else are you going to do?
Dwight says, she was not trying to kill her, just trying to make her submit so she can get the info.
That part's true too.
That's true.
I will actually go along with that.
Most times we do with Dwight.
Which Jason agrees.
Yep.
And then Dwight goes on.
She was willing to fight, but didn't want to, which is why she stopped every time the magistrate did. Yeah, I think that once again though.
But what you're saying is
he could have she could have disarmed.
Yeah,
her
and
I
think that that's what we mean. It's not necessarily like a point of killing.
Her.
It's really more of a point like the fight shouldn't have been going on at all. She needed information.
Or she could have just took the staff from her.
That's my thing. Force again. Use the force. She could have. I mean, granted, I know she's not going to choke her out because that's a dark side thing.
Although she's no Jedi.
True. But I mean, she could have like force pushed her. She could have taken the staff away. It's like you're dealing with a non-force user. I just have a problem.
Mm-hmm.
It's different if you're a Mandalorian or you're a warrior guy that's used to fighting armed people. Let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're somebody like her, and granted, I know she's no slouch when it comes to fighting too, but I don't know, man. I think that fight should have ended a lot sooner.
But I think once again, they just had to give us an Ahsoka battle. You know, it's like you got Ahsoka here. She's, you know.
Well, here's a thought. Do you think that this is going to be the only episode she's in this season?
Oh, no. No.
Really?
No.
No, I don't either. But I don't think she's going to pop up till the finale.
Exactly.
And she's going to fight Gideon with the Darksaber.
Exactly. And I also think Bo-Katan is going to show up too.
Oh, everybody is.
Yeah, it's going to be like the whole cavalry showing up.
Everybody.
Because I think this is what I see. My predictions for the remainder of at least the finale. I won't say the remainder, but the finale. I believe there's going to be a situation where those dark troopers, pretty much is what they're calling them so far.
Oh yeah, they're going to
show up.
Sure, they're going to be unleashed,
and it's going to be unleashed, and he's going to need people that's going to help. So I think that's we're going to get Grief Karga back, Cara Dune. We're going to get Bo-Katan and the rest of her people. And then we're going to get Ahsoka to kind of join in the fray. And then it's going to be like one big little climactic battle.
And then Jason says, what if the magistrate is force sensitive? That'd be kind of cheesy.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I don't either. I mean, why not? But I mean, it would at least explain why she could. But if the magistrate were force sensitive, she would use the force, I would think.
Definitely, because she would have no reason to hide it.
Oh, Ronaldo's got an interesting question. How many spin-off series do you think can be taken out of this season? I think at least 3. What are your 3, Ronaldo?
Yeah.
You knew we were going to turn that back on you, buddy.
Dwight says it would have been cool to hear her say after force choking her, "I'm no Jedi." Man,
that would have
Dwight,
been... Yeah, that would have been...
fam. That's all I'm saying.
That would have been awesome.
I would have lost my mind. Like, let's go.
Yeah, that would have been... But the problem with that, though...
I know.
The problem with that is then you would wonder... Because unfortunately, and of course, if you go back to our whole nature of the force thing, which is really in-depth and crazy, that Jason and Ronaldo were actually very active in. Mm-hmm. The problem is, at least the way that it stands to most, if you're not light, you're dark. Now, of course, we went on and we said, no, that's not true, and blah, 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 whatever. But the point is, simplicity is going to have to rule in a TV series, I think. And then Dwight also goes and says that...
At least 3.
Yeah, he's thinking at least 3.
Ronaldo, yep. No.
And well, we know that Boba Fett's going to be spun off.
Mm-hmm.
They had so much to announce that.
Yep.
There's been a rumor that there's going to be a Cara Dune series, which I could see.
But let's get to the big
the big bombshell.
Yeah, we got to hit this one, man. So she finally defeats the magistrate, and she finally asks, "Where's your master? Where is Grand Admiral Thrawn?"
Yes, which means we are going to get a live-action Thrawn. Now, the interesting thing about this is when people were starting to talk about Ahsoka's inevitable appearance, they started talking about Thrawn. Mm-hmm. I saw a lot of YouTube videos about all this Thrawn speculation, and I'm like, well, I wonder what's that all about? Because the Thrawn speculation that's happened before now has always been there's supposed to be some spin-off series of Thrawn and Ezra. That's been the purveying thing. That Thrawn is definitely being considered for a series, but this is what it's going to be, and like kind of their Outer Rim adventures or whatever. Now, from that standpoint, it makes sense then to introduce him in this and then spin him off, much like what they plan to do with Ahsoka. Mm-hmm. However, it didn't surprise me in the sense of I was somewhat ready for it, because when you start to see like a bunch of rumors and a ton of videos being made, somebody heard something from somewhere.
Right.
But it was chill-inducing, almost like when they brought him into Rebels and they announced it at Star Wars Celebration.
Right.
And, all of us Thrawn, because remember, I've been into Thrawn since 91. 1991, when Heir to the Empire came out, Thrawn was in there. I was a Thrawn fan from the first page that I read about him, and have been ever since. So when you actually heard the name Thrawn being mentioned in this show, even though I was half expecting it, I kind of wanted to cry a little bit. Ronaldo says, one with Boba Fett, the other with Ahsoka, and the other with Bo-Katan. Didn't think about Bo-Katan.
Jason says, I did not like that Thrawn was so closely associated with such a cruel person. He is not extremely caring, but he prefers low casualties. The magistrate does not care about life at all.
Well, but you got to look back at Governor Price, too. She basically had almost the same attitude. And, of course, you find out in the, in new canon books that actually Price is not as shallow and evil. I mean, she does sort of become that way, but you see why, and you see what her deal is. So Thrawn will use anybody as a tool. Don't forget that in the expanded universe, when Thrawn was created, he created that weird Jedi master named Joris C'baoth, who was like insane. So Thrawn's the kind of guy that even though he himself is honorable, and especially in the new canon version of the books, he's really like almost a good guy. Mm-hmm. It's weird. But, yeah, he's definitely going to be that guy that's going to get things done. And he does have a cruel side. Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Dwight says, you couldn't bring her back without including Thrawn because that is what she was doing after the Empire fell.
Yeah, and Dwight brings up a good point because don't forget that you somewhat have to go back to that final episode of Rebels where they give you this epilogue, and a lot of that epilogue is taking place after Return of the Jedi. So you kind of, that's sort of a prequel to The Mandalorian in a sense.
Jason says, do you think we are going to finally get an accurate pronunciation of Thrawn's actual name, which I'm not even going to try to.
It's Mithra Neuro. No, okay, whatever.
Yep, exactly.
I can say it like when I'm reading it usually, but yeah. You know what? Probably. I mean, if they're bringing him in, it would be kind of cool. Jason also says Thrawn was associated with the Empire, but the Empire is extremely powerful. Teaming with the Empire was a necessary evil. The Magistrate does not hold that much power. And then Ronaldo says, first of all, I almost passed out with that name drop. Well, I'm glad you're still with us and you came to enough to join us here. Second, this made me ask a big question. Who is in charge, Gideon or Thrawn? Thrawn. Right. Are they working together or are they fighting each other to see who leads the Empire?
That's the big question.
Well, yes and no. But see, the problem is, the beauty is we kind of have the Aftermath books and some of these other things which they have brought into the series. So what's happening in the Aftermath trilogy, which admittedly probably takes place between Return of the Jedi and this series. Part of the final book, which escapes me. Life Debt's the second one. Aftermath's the first one. For some reason, I can't remember the third one. But the third one might brush up against this timeline a little bit, but not by much if it does. So you have to remember that during this time period, you have a bunch of Grand Admirals and Grand Moffs and all this stuff trying to be the guy. Now, we know that Grand Admiral Thrawn was in the unknown regions with Ezra at some unspecified time. This would allow them to fight and to do all this stuff. I guarantee you, as soon as Thrawn comes back, everybody's going to basically align with him. We also don't know...
Empire's End, by the way.
Empire's End, that was it. We also don't know if Thrawn and Gideon are working together. That's absolutely a possibility. Absolutely. Because, and we brought this up, I think, a week ago, we really don't know who Gideon is.
Right.
Why does Gideon have the Darksaber? Why is he only a Moff, yet he acts like he's more of a Grand Moff? Mm-hmm. You know, where does he fit in the Empire? He seems like he's a pretty high up guy. Or maybe he just has a really good chunk of the remnants because Ray Sloan has a bunch. Oh man, I swore I would not do this today. What's the guy? Hux. General Hux's dad was really prominent during this time. And he was big. He had a good chunk of the Empire too. So you had a bunch of guys that had like really big giant chunks of the Empire and they were sort of trying to outdo each other and stab each other in the back and take over their things. But then you had these small little, kind of like Werner Herzog's character. You had guys like him who, I mean, it turns out he was working for Gideon, but you just had people like that, like these warlord guys that had a little bit of enough of like a garrison or something. Mm. So it would be interesting. Jason goes on to say, I think Thrawn are separate. I don't think Thrawn is even part of the Empire. Why would he return to a dying Empire instead of staying and fighting the Grisk? Also, where was Thrawn in the sequels? Well, you have to remember that Thrawn was in the unknown regions during this time. And in fact, the new book that just came out is talking about his time in the unknown regions. It's a little bit of a prequel, though, but I think it's setting up to when he and Ezra went out. So he went out. He didn't know the Empire had fallen. I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to align the story with the original expanded universe. You have to remember that in the original expanded universe, the introduction of Thrawn took over after Palpatine fell. And he had a right-hand man named Paleon, Admiral Paleon. And basically, he had this idea of how to return the Empire to its former glory. I also have a feeling that given his closeness with Palpatine probably clued him in on this whole, hey, I'm going to come back plan. Now I need you to go back, and here's what I need you to do. So I think that we're going to get a little bit of that too. Ronaldo, of course, comes in and says Empire's End is the third book. Love you guys. Jason says, General Hux wasn't a military leader. He was a teacher. Yeah, but you have to remember that he went on. If you read, what book was it? Empire's End, actually. He had started forming along with, because he was trying to remember, they had formed some committee or something like that where they were going to try to govern things, which of course somewhat fell apart, but it was a mess.
Yeah, I mean, with Gideon...
Brendel Hux. Yes, thank you, Ronaldo. His name was Brendel Hux. And then Jason, of course, says, yeah. That was it.
Yeah, well, Gideon being like a member of the ISB, which is basically like the Imperial Security Bureau. Basically, that's kind of like their
internal affairs, actually.
Yeah. So they're kind of like, he was pretty much a high up ranking.
They popped up in the Thrawn books.
Mm-hmm.
And they also popped up in Aftermath as well. And by Aftermath, I mean the trilogy, not just the first book.
Gotcha.
So it looks like, I think that we can get from this, that they're really trying to hit the Aftermath trilogy. They're really trying to, in a sense, bring that in.
Mm-hmm.
And
to a live action situation.
Yeah, to kind of a live action situation. And then they're also trying to bring in a little bit of the whole Rebels thing as well. Jason says, I don't think Thrawn was very trusted by Palpatine. There's a lot of truth to that, actually. Palpatine used him because of his knowledge of the unknown regions and his military skill. But here's something that I've been curious about, too, ever since reading the new Thrawn trilogy, particularly the first book. Palpatine is talking about, and this is really reiterated big time in the Aftermath books, he's talking about a dark force that's calling out to him from the unknown regions.
Mm-hmm.
We still don't know what that is. And it makes me wonder, because Exegol being in the unknown regions, it's sort of like he figured that out. Maybe it was the Sith Acolytes. Who knows?
Could be the Grisk.
No, because the Grisk weren't really about, though. They were more like kind of like the enemies that the High Republic are going to face, like your pirates and your warrior guys. And the Grisk would actually be more akin to a Mandalorian type.
Mm.
Maybe a combination of them and the Yuuzhan Vong. That's who I was really hoping would make the return. I was hoping they'd bring the Yuuzhan Vong back into this whole thing somehow.
Mm.
Which they could. I mean, obviously, it would have to be different from what's in the expanded universe, but they could new canonize it a bit.
So, do you all ask Jason and Ronaldo this question? And Dwight, do you think
they're going to say, man, you're not going to leave out Dwight, are you?
Of course not. Do you think they're going to bring Ezra back?
Well, I do. I don't know if he's going to be in the second season. I think that would be more of a third season.
But I'm saying like at all, period, like in this.
Sure,
Mandalorian
because
story.
the whole idea is there's supposed to be some. Now, again, I know things can change on an almost daily basis over at Lucasfilm, but I think that you have to look at it from the standpoint of they've been talking about a spin-off series between Thrawn and Ezra. What a perfect way to do it. I mean, once they're bringing Thrawn into this, it's kind of like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I was also really surprised, too, because it seemed like Gideon was going to be the ultimate bad guy in this.
Well, yeah, there's always somebody else, honestly.
Always a bigger fish.
Now, Ronaldo poses a question that I'm glad he proposed, because I was actually going to lead into this. So another big question is, who will be the Jedi that will feel Grogu when Din Djarin takes him to Tython?
Oh, I should also mention, too, the Tython, I don't know what they're going to do with it in this version of canon, But in the expanded universe, Tython was actually the origin place of the Jedi. So it's really interesting that they bring it here. I really can't wait to see what they do with that. But it's a good question.
So here's the.
I know everybody thinks it's Luke.
I'm thinking it could be Luke, or it could be Ezra.
I would bet more money on Ezra.
Maybe that's how they bring Ezra back.
I would bet it would make more sense because Ezra at this point is a Jedi.
Mm-hmm.
He would have some background, not like Ahsoka would, but he has some. So I could see that being a thing. Mm-hmm. Because again, and don't get me wrong, guys, it would actually make sense for it to be Luke because one of the problems I said of bringing the Jedi into this time period is you almost have to bring Luke back at some point because he's the man.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what I'm saying. Like, you got too much stuff going on and especially because here's my thing: if you got a strong Force user like Grogu, you know what I'm saying, and
you have to think about that before you say
it. So then okay, he's calling out from like one of the ancient Jedi temples. Luke's got to feel that.
That's what I'm saying. It's kind of like
Luke
is rebuilding the thing. He's rebuilding like the Jedi Prime at this point.
Exactly. Like,
if there's all this Force stuff going on, he's got to feel it.
Mm-hmm.
He has to know something's up.
Yep. Especially between that and either it's got to be him or Ezra.
So then Dwight says, Sabine too, unless something happens to her off the grid. Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, and we actually dealt with this, I think, probably before you got on, is that even though our whole thing of Sasha Banks playing Sabine turned out not to be true, that does not rule out Sabine being brought in. My personal opinion, though, and I think you shared this as well, is that Sabine's probably going to be more of a season 3 than a season 2 character.
Yeah.
And it would make more sense because you would then, once the Darksaber is away from Gideon and once they do whatever they're going to do, who's going to rule Mandalore or Mandalorians? Is it going to be Bo-Katan? Is it going to be Sabine? I mean, there's a little bit of a power struggle there. Jason says, I don't think Luke is coming to the Mandalorian yet. And that's the thing. I don't know if he would pop up. I could see him popping up, though, because it would almost, if you bring too much of this whole Jedi stuff into it, it's like you almost have to put him in there.
Mm-hmm.
It would
at least
actually
mention him. Yeah.
Yes, or at least mention him because it would actually it would destroy the storyline more by not bringing him in than it would be. It's not a fan service thing. Ronaldo says, I think it will be Ezra. But if it had to be someone else, I think it would be Luke. The last option would be Cal Kestis. That name rings a bell. Who is Cal? Dwight agrees. And then Jason says they could also make it a new Jedi or one we did not know survived the Purge. That would be convenient. This would be a great opportunity to bring Kip Duran back from the expanded universe. I mean, we're bringing everybody else in. No love for Kip? Come on. Yeah, I mean, I just think that, again, they have to do something that makes sense to the story. They are far enough out that maybe it doesn't get on Luke's radar yet because he's trying to build stuff, but you have to wonder if Ahsoka's been running around all this time. You would think that she had to have heard of this Luke Skywalker guy. Mm-hmm. If nothing else, his name would be
Skywalker.
Sure, he would be all over the place because of the Death Star destruction. You don't necessarily have to know that he was a Jedi and all this stuff, but you probably have heard this guy's name in Contact of the Rebellion. As soon as you hear Luke Skywalker, Ahsoka's going to go, whoa, wait a minute. Hold it.
Right.
I got to go check this out.
Mm-hmm.
And if she did seek out Luke, which would make sense that she would, because she might feel his connection in the Force, given that she was so connected to Anakin.
Yep.
I know it would make sense. Plus, they still have to figure out, they still have to explain. And if you guys, if they've already explained this adequately, let me know. But there's still that whole ending of Rebels where Vader goes back and visits, her lightsabers that she buried in the snow.
Well, that's my thing too, because I was going to bring that up. Is that the cool thing that we got in this episode was that we got to learn a lot about Grogu, but the other thing we didn't know, we didn't get any information on was her. Like, where has she been?
Yeah, it's a good point, because I think we have been so wrapped up in, it's Ahsoka live action, and ooh, white lightsabers, and oh, look, she's flipping, and oh, she looks exactly like that. We are kind of like, wait a minute, what's she been doing?
Yeah, exactly.
But what part of it is because we got a little bit of that epilogue in Rebels, but you're right, it's not that much. I mean,
yeah,
it's interesting. From Fallen Order, right?
But I think going back to the Ahsoka piece, though, I think that part of it is because if you notice, she never when she talked to Din Djarin about I've seen it happen to the best. It was like she never mentioned like, oh yeah, my former master became Darth Vader. Like Din Djarin would know about that, and he was like, wait, that was your master, so. It's
not the kind of thing that you go off just bragging about.
Well, no, but what I'm saying is that
look what happened to Leia, man.
Well, yeah, true. But I mean, what I'm saying is that when you stop and really think about it, because we talked earlier about casual fans, right?
Mm-hmm.
So casual fans may not know who this Ahsoka Tano person is. We do, but they don't. So.
Yeah,
to them, she's just a random Jedi is what I'm saying.
Right.
To them, she's just a random Jedi, but we know her whole backstory. So the fact that maybe they're leading up to the fact that like she's going to reveal who she really is, and then, okay, look, yes, Anakin Skywalker became Darth Vader. That was my master at one point. Here we are, blah, 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 blah. But that's all I'm saying is that there's still a part of her story that has not officially been told to people in a live action setting, that people who are invested in the Mandalorian. We just know it based upon the Clone Wars animation.
Yeah, I mean, I get that. I mean, it's one of those things that I think that there's enough. I think there's more question about what Luke was doing during those 30 years between Return of the Jedi and Force Awakens than there are what Ahsoka was doing. Because remember, Ahsoka left the Jedi Order. And that stood. I mean, it wasn't like she went back and she became a Jedi again. She went back and worked with the Jedi, but she made it very clear, even in that last season, that she wasn't about that life anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So, you get a little bit of like Cal from Jedi Fallen Order. It's like, okay, you're just kind of, or Kanan even. You just sort of get a real job. Even though I do have to say, one of the things that I thought was kind of a double entendre in a way that I was like, was when she was kind of like, what was it?
Oh, like I like first good
yeah,
or bad.
like first times they're either like really good or really bad. I'm like,
that's all right.
Well, what are you talking about there, Ahsoka?
Hey, it applies.
I mean,
It penetrates, it binds us.
Ronaldo says, or what if the one who comes looking for Grogu is not a Jedi but a dark side user? That would be a cool twist. Yeah, that would be a cool twist. Jason says, do you think Ahsoka has found Ezra yet? Or is she tracking down Thrawn because she knows Ezra is with him? An interesting option would be that she sent Grogu to Tython to try and guide Ezra to Tython. Yeah, see, these are all really, really amazing points because they could... Being that Favreau and Filoni are just so dialed into the canon, it would actually make sense that they would put together... Like, if it were anybody else, I'd say no way. But being as those guys, I'm like, yeah, it probably is.
Well, I could see... I think that's why Ahsoka wanted to know where Thrawn was.
Yeah, because really...
Because why would she care?
Exactly. Why would she care? And that's the thing that's a little strange.
Yeah, like if he's gone into the unknown regions, he's not bothering anybody else in her realm. So why do you care? So you must have something that I want or need, and that's Ezra.
Exactly. And these are... Man, there are so many. Once again, it's like be careful what you wish for. And we knew this was going to happen, is that you get some questions answered and you get what you want kind of, but now there's all these other questions that happen.
Well, and everybody said that, the Mandalorian is actually going to bridge a lot of things from the sequel trilogy. So it's like we talked about on The Siege, like, okay, if that was actually a Snoke or a version of Snoke or whatever they were trying to create, like, that makes sense because people are always saying, well, where did he come from? If we see him created at some point, then we get like, oh, okay. This is where.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And I mean, and I agree. And I think that is eventually what we are going to see.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. It's going to be, I'll tell you though, this episode is the one that really just put us into hyperspace.
Yeah, this thing just shot it up a whole notch, man.
Yeah. Now it's really hard to wait until next week.
Definitely.
But, as always, we will be reviewing these shows. This time we'll do like one episode at a time. Mm-hmm. We will probably do it as the first segment of our cantina every week. I think we're back on track now. So, yeah, we got a lot to think about and a lot to discuss. Again, if you guys are on Facebook at all, you can check us out, Head to Head a Star Wars Community on Facebook. We're a good group there. A lot of people that watch the show online actually discuss stuff in there. Dave Cossey's on there.
Yes, sir.
So he's always good to discuss anything you guys want. We actually got into a whole thing about how TIE fighters land and how people can get up in them, and big discussion. But you can check that out. We're going to do some Facebook group only stuff. You can also find us at Head to Head SW on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. All kinds of opportunities to check us out. We're going to be doing a lot more reaction videos and things. Like I said, if you haven't checked out that Star Wars holiday special that we did, the link's in the comments. So I think that that's going to wrap it up. What do you guys think is going to happen with Thrawn, with Gideon? Pretty much, how do you guys think season 2 is going to end? That's really going to be the question. Dwight says, remember, they are supposed to be trying to mimic the MCU. Kinda. I don't think they're totally trying to do that, but they're trying to do different phases. That's true.
Yeah.
But whatever you guys are thinking, whether you're watching this live, of course, you still have some time to chat it with us. If you're watching the rebroadcast, definitely leave the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. And please, like this video. It really helps us to bring more episodes to you. All right. Looks like it's time for probably my favorite segment, huh?
Yes, sir.
Not that I don't love all this stuff, but now we're going to start to answer the questions that you guys have sent in to us. It's a segment we call Clear Your Mind. That's right. You guys send in questions. We take 2 questions a week, and we answer them in this segment. So what do we got first?
The first question comes from Steve Garrity. His question is, do you think that we have seen the last of Boba Fett?
No, I think that there have been some people that have thought that maybe that they're going to use him. Like, that was the launch, and now it's going to be, his own spinoff or whatever. I don't think so. I think he's going to do similar to kind of a Moff Gideon thing from last season. I think he's going to be in the final 2 episodes. And I definitely think that the final 2 episodes are going to be kind of like one long episode, similar to how episodes 2 and 3 were. Mm-hmm. Because there's no way they're going to wrap up this whole finale thing. And if you think about it, that's next. So next week we'll have 6, and then it's the final 2 episodes.
Yep.
So I definitely think that we're going to get
more of the Fets.
Yeah, more of the Fets. Jason, of course, commenting on our thing. Those first 2 piano notes are great. I do love the Clear Your Mind theme. Yeah, it's very new agey and relaxing.
The next question is from Richie Caldwell. His question is, how will Groot communicate? Groot. So long.
Oh, this is, what? I'm starting to miss the days when we called him Baby Yoda, because now we're going to get, how did Gringus...
Genghis Khan over there.
So what's Greedo's...
How will Grogu communicate to Din Djarin what choice he made if he can't talk.
Well, it'll probably be like facial expressions, and I'm sure whatever Jedi or whatever like shows up to interpret the thing.
Well, I mean, like, does he just? I mean, it's not like you just put him on a little thing. He does a little magic hands, and then he just pops up. I mean,
no, I think what's going to happen is that a Jedi, and for all we know, he's sending him to this planet. She might actually call somebody and be like, "Hey, man, you might want to get to Tython like now, because." I got a Yoda-like species going over there right now, and he's going to choose whether or not he's going to wipe us all out or be cool. I mean, because the other thing that bothers me about the Jedi sometimes, it's like, will you guys stop leaving things to chance?
Well, my thing is, like, shouldn't she be the one to take him to this
Right.
whole Jedi temple?
Right.
I mean, like, what does he know about it? He doesn't
Exactly.
Even...
He can't even communicate with it. He didn't even know its name.
Right.
She's with him for like 5 minutes, and she knows his name.
Knows his name, what happened to him.
Oh, yeah, the whole backstory and all that. He's
Right.
been with him for a whole season, and he really he knows he likes shiny objects, he likes to eat eggs, and, I mean, it's kind of like, yeah, it's, once again, the Jedi are constantly leaving things in the hands of other people who are not qualified to do it, and then they wonder why things go wrong. Yes, she should be the one to do it.
Absolutely.
But, then again...
It would be a story then. Huh?
I wish Baby Yoda's name had been McClunky.
McClunky.
Yeah, it's like a little thing going around. But the really big thing to me is that whoever this Jedi is, I think they're going to know... Like, I think they're going to be able to communicate with them the way Ahsoka does. And I think that they're going to basically know more or less what to do and how to do it.
It better be Luke then, because...
I know.
Because even Ezra's like, what experience has he really had with this?
I know. Well, we don't know what he's been through in the unknown regions. Jason says, what did you think of that scene where Mando is trying to get Grogu to plug the red wire for the blue one? Yeah, man. You know what?
Hilarious.
I totally forgot to mention that.
That was hilarious.
Oh man, was that episode? Was that the last one? 4?
That was
Yeah,
yeah.
because that was like the whole beginning. That was the funniest thing ever.
Yeah. No. Put the blue one. Put the blue. No, not that.
Oh man, that was great, and the patience that he had. And I mean, I really like the dynamic between those two.
Yeah.
It's really nice to see a Mandalorian guy. It's almost like the 3 men and a baby kind of thing where, or what was it The Rock or Vin Diesel? Where they were like the nanny or something?
Oh, yeah.
Where they did that movie, The Baby or something.
I think that was, well, they both did it. The Pacifier, though.
Pacifier, that's the one I'm thinking
Yeah.
of. So it's
Vin
sort of
Diesel.
like you see like these hardcore action dudes. It's almost like Schwarzenegger when he did Kindergarten Cop.
Right.
It's that kind of thing. And it's nice to see the Mandalorian or a Mandalorian sort of in this nursemaid kind of situation. He's having to teach this little kid and he doesn't really know how to communicate with them. And he's always like, no.
Well,
I told you.
My thing is, like, why would you put that? Like, you can't communicate with it. I mean, I know he had figured I had to try something, but...
Well, he was the only one that was small enough to get in there.
Well, yeah, but that's what I'm saying. But, like, you trying to get that thing to do what you wanted to do. Like, you knew that was a...
My thing is, how are you going to get it out of there?
Oh, he'll probably just, come here. I mean, that part he knows.
Flamethrower.
Use a little grappling hook thing and just yank him out.
Now, see, that I want to see. Because that would be hilarious. Oh, yeah, Jason, man, I'm so glad you brought that up. I totally forgot to mention that. There was a bunch of stuff. Like I said, I was watching some of the stuff quick and a few things escaped me. But there were so many funny lines, I thought, in these last 3 episodes that were just priceless.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I thought that it was really great. And it was a lot of fun. And that's the thing that I really love about the show, right? So it does a lot of things that are cool for canon. And it's a really good action adventure Western style thing, but it's fun. It's fun. It's funny. It has a lot of that Star Wars humor that we all love.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't take itself too seriously. But yet it gives us a really good story that it's literally like the beginning of seeing the novels come to life.
Yeah.
And now I would actually be up for reading Mandalorian novels
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, definitely.
or the Mandalorian comic series. It would be cool. And I know we brought this up on one of the shows, Mandalorian movie,
Yeah, we did.
so that would be pretty cool. But as always, let us know what you guys are thinking in the comments section. I think on this holiday weekend, we're going to wind things down. It's interesting because we basically sandwiched Thanksgiving in between two shows. We had our Star Wars holiday special in the comments section. You guys can check that out. And now we're having our regular show. So this is pretty cool. We're doing 2 shows in a week.
Yeah.
It's kind of, you're probably like, yeah, I know. But it's been a lot of fun. So again,
Definitely.
if you guys have ideas for maybe stuff we can make videos on, or maybe some Star Wars stuff to react to, leave that in the comments section and let us know. Hit us up at Head to Head SW on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. Let us know what you're thinking there. Of course, don't forget to like and subscribe this video, and check out the channel and click the notification bell too, so you'll be aware of any other programs that we're coming out with, because we're always trying to think of new stuff that you guys can check out. And so with that, I think it's going to wrap up our show for this evening.
Yes, sir.
All right. So we'll see you guys next week, 8 o'clock, same time. I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.